Evening. Welcome to the January 20th, 2015 meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard. We're just waiting for Mr. Scholes to finish his dinner to take the seat between us, but I know the entire board is here this evening. So I call the meeting to order. The first item, is the tape recorder on? Push record. All right, here we go. The first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes from December 30 and January 6. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from December 30 and January 6?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion about that from anybody on the board? From anybody who's in attendance? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from December 30 and January 6 as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. The next matter on tonight's agenda is chair's remarks. Effective 7 o'clock this morning, Peter Elwell took the helm as town manager for the town of Brattleboro. We want to welcome Peter back to Brattleboro and welcome him to the role as town manager. We also want to thank Patrick once again for all of his hard work over the course of the last, I count 18 months, although it may be less, as interim town manager. Just about 18 months. We'll look forward as the new management team begins working together. I know I've had this opportunity since Peter arrived here in the middle of last week to work with Peter and meet with him on a number of occasions. The breadth of knowledge and experience that he brings to the position is really cause for great hope going forward as we look forward to dealing with all the challenges we're dealing with. I would also note, just as a general matter, that there's a series of issues that have been coming back to the select board agenda on a regular basis, and they appear once again on tonight's agenda. We do have a special meeting scheduled for January 29th when we're going to be approving the warning for town meeting, and we're going to be working through again tonight some of these more substantial issues, including the budget issues related to the unassigned fund balance and the potential of looking again at a local option sales tax. And we may have decisions on those tonight, or they may all be integrated into the meeting on the 29th. That really depends on the way in which tonight's meeting shakes out. But we'll look forward to dealing with that and all the other business that's on for tonight. The next item on the agenda is the town manager's comments. So we turn it over to Mr. Elwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just take a few moments tonight to do something that I won't do again. From here on in, comments I offer at these meetings will be focused on our town business that we'll be conducting during the course of the evening. But being my first opportunity to speak to you in this setting and to the public, I wanted to thank everyone, actually, with a few specific thank yous, beginning with the town staff. I've had the opportunity to meet quite a few of the town staff, and I will meet everyone over the course of the next few weeks. Been thoroughly impressed with everyone that I've met so far. The management team is outstanding, and I really look forward to being their teammate in service to the community. I think a great example of the quality of the work and the commitment of the staff is the response that Public Works and the two public safety departments showed on Sunday when we had the rain and it was hitting very cold ground and creating all kinds of awful conditions out there. The emergency response to those who needed it and the tireless efforts to try to keep the roadways as safe as possible were, I think, good examples of the work that the staff does and the care that they show to the community. I want to add my thanks to Patrick and to Jan. You had to do yeoman's work in being an understaffed town manager's office for far longer than anybody expected for that to go on. And I know what the work at the manager's office requires and the center of activity for a busy community like Brattleboro is, and the quality of your service and the diligence with which you stuck with it when it went on and on unexpectedly is really tremendous. So thank you, and it's been a pleasure to start working together within our office. I want to say to all of you that I'm sorry that the process of hiring a new town manager was as long and as difficult for Brattleboro as it was. I have the irony of also being grateful that it actually unfolded in the way that it did, and it ended up with creating the opportunity for me to come back here and be your town manager. So I hope you'll forgive me for the fact that ironically, I'm glad that it actually took the twists and turns that it did, and we're here together tonight, and I hope that you'll find that that has turned out well for the community when we have a chance to work together over time. But I'm mindful of the fact that it has been a tough road these last 18 months, and I appreciate that you all stuck with that, and those of you in the room and the others out in the community who care a lot about the town and invest themselves in the work of the town, that you've continued to do that through this transitional period. I want to let you, the people at Brattleboro, know that I'm available to any of you at any time. So please call. I want to meet with you. I want to talk with you. I want to know the things that you're concerned about, the things that you think are really special about Brattleboro and need to be protected, and the things that you think we need to address. I've got a pretty good handle, I think, on the top priority matters that need to be addressed. But call me, and we'll get together. And if there's something you think I need to see out in the town, I'll meet you there. And we'll together work towards keeping Brattleboro special. And finally, and most importantly, I want to thank the Select Board for the faith that you've placed in me. Really looking forward to the work that we're going to do together in addressing the issues of the town. Excited to be here tonight and ready to get started. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. The next matter on the agenda is Select Board comments and committee reports. Anybody on the Select Board have any comments or committee reports?
I do.
David?
Anybody else? Well, first is I wanted to not report so much as announce to everyone that the third of this year's committee conversations with the town school board is going to be tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock at Green Street School. It's dealing with how the difference in the elementary schools and how they deal with behavior and discipline issues, and the effects of poverty on the communities, and also how the schools are similar and how they're different, and how we make sure that every student, every child has an opportunity to learn. So I encourage people to come and attend and learn about that. Also, there's a conference coming up about leveraging climate change to promote economic development. And I wanted to let the rest of the Select Board know about it. I believe it's February, I think it's the second week in February, and I can get the information, the accurate information, but I intend to go, and I didn't know if anybody else wanted to come along for the ride or not, but I'd be happy to provide transportation. And then the actual report from the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, the budget was voted up. The vote was 13 to 9. It was actually 13 to 4 if you count it in terms of towns. And so it's passed, and we are in the same place we were previous to our last meeting, and the conversation took place there. And I would like to ask that we, I'm not sure where in the meeting to do it, I'd like to ask that we put an initiative on the ballot asking for people to say whether they want us to keep the roll-off recycling containers on Fairground Road or not, so the public can actually have a conversation about it. And so when I go to represent the town, I'm representing the town and not various specific interests or groups of interests. So I'm not sure if I should do that this week, make a motion right now, next week, or when, but I would like to have the town weigh in on that one. And not just the town reps, but the entire town.
I think what we'll do with that specific item is draft language to be considered if it's acceptable to you on the 29th, and then the board can vote about whether or not to include that language, and we'll ask the town manager to consult with you about just how you'd like to see that worded, and then we can include that for the 29th for consideration and discussion at that time. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Anybody else on the board? All right. The next matter on the agenda is public participation. There's a whole series of items on the agenda, and there's a lot of people in attendance. But if there's anything that anybody wants to speak to that's not on the agenda, this would be a good time. I know that Mr. Bristol is here for that purpose.
I'll be very, very fast because you do have a full agenda. I understand.
Take whatever time you need.
Gordon Bristol here tonight, and my wife Jean was going to be here, but she got called away, so couldn't be. Got a little feel-good story for you. I want to come back and say thank you to this Board of Selectmen, and we have the predecessor boards of Selectmen to you, that 5 years ago, the Veterans Affairs was looking for a place to locate here in Brattleboro, and my wife and I went out and found Dr. Chard and Dr. Kinley's building and encouraged the Veterans Affairs to indeed lease that building and bring their jobs and the care for veterans here. The part that you all played was we got a $50,000 loan from the town of Brattleboro in your revolving loan fund. We also got a $40,000 loan from the county. Tonight, which is why I called John O'Connor, we are presenting our very last payment. So 5 years has gone by quickly. You hear a lot of bad stories. We want to tell you the good stories. And what we were able to do with that $90,000 is we were able to take a commercial building that you have here in Brattleboro and put that money back into the building, and that's what we did. The building was about a 25-year-old building at the time. We put all that money right back into the building. We got a building permit for it. We put all our money back into the building at that time, and we were able to bring it and make it a modern, state-of-the-art building, and also a LEEDs equivalent building, which was one of the third buildings at that time in the town of Brattleboro. So we're not looking for any awards or anything like that. We're just simply telling you about that. And the last thing is what that's done as ongoing for the town of Brattleboro. We've paid over $90,000 in taxes to the town. I think that's something you need to know. And we pay almost $20,000 a year. So again, this is an ongoing thing because you had a local developer ourselves be able to buy that as opposed to having the government come in and buying it and go off the tax rolls or go to some less amount. Also, lastly, is the Veterans Affairs now hires 11 full-time people in there. It started out with about 4, and it continues to grow, unfortunately, but it has to grow because it's a need for our veterans. They now have an audiology booth in there. They now do homeless veteran work there, and they also have an outreach where they go out and those who can't make it into the clinic. The services that we require from the town are fairly minimal. It starts with the plowing of the roads, and we appreciate that. We have our fire department that's on call. We have our police department that's on call. The bus comes down there. So those are the big ones that our particular building uses and would encourage you to keep spending money on. So thank you, and we hope you keep the revolving loan fund going for others. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Bristol. Anybody else have anything they want to say in public participation? Mr. DeGray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Peter, and thank you, Patrick. I was here a couple of weeks ago, and I know I'm not the official spokesman for the Christmas stocking, but anybody who has been paying attention sees that they're woefully short of their goal of $90,000. There was actually a nice story in the paper that an anonymous donor has stepped forward to match dollar for dollar up to $5,000, which would help them reach their goal of $90,000. So this is an appeal to the community, not only Brattleboro, but the surrounding towns, that if you have given, please find a way to make another donation. I can tell you firsthand that this is one of the most worthwhile organizations that I've ever worked with. The volunteers, their board is absolutely outstanding. I'm a mule for them, so I certainly don't deserve any recognition, nor do I seek it. But you would be proud to see what your dollars do for those in need, and really find it in your heart to make a donation to this most worthwhile organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeGray. Anybody else want to speak during public participation? I guess I should note, and I should have said during Chair's comments, the deadline for petitions for town offices is the 26th. Would that be fair to say, Jan?
Yes.
January 26th, and
5 p.m.
at 5 p.m. And we certainly know that there are many openings for town meeting representatives. There are many other offices that are going to be on the ballot, and we encourage anybody who's interested in participating in our local government to get and submit a petition to run for local office. Anybody else in public participation? So the next item on the agenda is liquor commissioners. We're ready for a motion to convene as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
We have a motion to convene as liquor commissioners. Is there any discussion from anybody on the board? Anybody's in attendance? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. So we have 5 special event permit applications in connection with a Strolling of the Heifers ski jump event. So I'm wondering if there's somebody from Strolling of the Heifers here to speak to those matters? Yep. Hi, you want to come up to the table? If you want to tell us your names.
I'm Stacy Kahn. I'm the general manager.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi.
And I'm Molly Alderman Person, and I'm the intern for Strolling of the Heifers.
Excellent. If you want to tell us a little bit about the event that is scheduled for Friday, February 13th from 5 to 8 p.m. I guess this is free publicity.
You're on TV.
You're on TV live.
So, Strolling of the Heifers is having a beer, cider, and cheese festival on Friday, February 13th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Robert H. Gibson River Garden. So admission to get into the event is $20, and with the $20 you will receive 8 drink sampling tickets that will give you 2-ounce pours of each sample.
I understand that this is being organized in conjunction with the ski jump?
Yes.
Excellent. Can you tell us, please, I understand that we have 5 applications tonight, but we may have more coming in total. I guess that we've seen a press release indicating that there's going to be 8 vendors. Maybe you could tell us about the scope of the event as a whole.
Okay, so yes, we are expecting 8 brewers to be at the event. So there's going to be brewers, there's also going to be other specialty food vendors there as well. We have spoken to the other 3 brewers that have not handed in their permits yet, and we're expecting to get them by Monday, January 26th for the next meeting.
Do you think it would be prudent to table it until we get them all, or do you want to just do them in 2 different meetings, or I'm just spitballing?
I think that in connection with the alcohol permits for the Strolling of the Heifers main event in June, which is a much more family-oriented event, we had concerns about the number of alcohol vendors that we're going to be serving. And we did ask that we have an overview of what's contemplated so that we're not getting successive applications, so that we know how many permits we're being asked to approve. I get the sense, although maybe you want to inquire on your own, that this is a different kind of an event.
Oh, I think it is. I think it is. And you're only looking for, 8 was the...
8 is the final.
8 is it.
Yep.
Yes.
No, the only reason I asked that is because, so we don't have, redundancy and just, I'd like to see them all at once, but if it's the board's pleasure to do it in 2 different meetings, that's fine. Because we always have this concern about these permits, and I know this is a separate event completely from the June events, so that was my only concern.
If anybody on the board's got any views about whether it should be tabled so we can consider altogether, or any other things about this application.
Now, I'm reading your press release, and this is only, you have to be 21 or older to get in.
Correct.
Right, so that's different than what you do during the stroll.
Yep.
I'm comfortable doing the 5 tonight.
Yeah.
Everybody else?
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Yep.
Any other questions on this side, sir? Comments?
I have one, David. I just want to make sure, so it seems like 8 drink tickets is quite a lot, and I realize it's a small pour per ticket. And I, in my ideal world, would have a string of taxis out for people when they come out. But there will be abundant food for people to also be eating as they're sampling all these amazing locally brewed beverages,
Yes.
libations.
Yep. So we have a total right now of 27 vendors in all. So that's including the 8 brewers, but a lot of specialty food people are coming, and we're also in contact with others too that aren't on the list. So there will be a lot of samples.
Great.
And people will have the opportunity to buy from the specialty food people as well. So
Thank you.
Other questions from the board?
Can I move all 5 of them in one motion?
Well, can we,
Okay.
I talked to Peter about this, you might have more info about the 7 words that hermit thrush.
Right, we do
wants
have to
out.
fix hermit thrushes because they're talking about growler fills.
Right.
And
And I think the growler's the big thing. So you're not doing growler fills. You're only doing 2-ounce tastings.
Exactly.
So you
would
want us
take
to take
forever.
out the words "and growler fills"?
I would take out the entire thing up to a beer and cheese tasting event.
Describe the event. Okay, so for the hermit thrush application, there being no objection, it sounds like we're striking the words 2-ounce tasting pours and growler fills from the application form itself. Is that okay? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That having been said, is there a reason that we have to do all 5 separately? Anybody have a reason to? All right, David?
I move that we approve a special event permit for Vermont Hard Cider Company LLC, the 14th Star Brewing Company LLC, the Citizen Cider, McNeil's Brewery, and the Hermit Thrush Brewery LLC for a beer, cider, and cheese festival sponsored by Strolling of the Heifers at the River Garden, 157 Main Street on Friday, February 13th, from 5 to 8 p.m.
We have a motion to approve those 5 special event alcohol permits. Anybody who's in attendance want to comment or have any questions? Anybody on the board have any other questions or comments? Well, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Thank you very much and good luck.
thank you.
Thank you very
All
much.
right. The next item on the agenda is, and this is also under Liquor Commissioners, is an inquiry from the town clerk about the liquor license renewal process. But I don't see Annette. Oh, there she is.
She's in the back.
Annette Cappy.
Good evening, and thank you. As I have laid out in the memo to you, this is a proposal to change the way that we process liquor license renewals annually. Each year, they are all due by the end of April. It's a lengthy process, starting in December, when DLC emails all of the town clerks in Vermont the renewal forms. Then it's up to the clerk's office. You send out the renewals, wait for them to come back, you review the application, check that all the information is there. Then they go before you, and then after going before select boards of communities, then they are forwarded on to DLC, and DLC does the final approval or disapproval. And DLC gives it a fine check, looking for items like has everybody that's required to take the classes had their classes, has any change occurred in the listing of directors. Those are things that we don't do on the local level, but DLC does on the state level. But usually the way we do it is we wait for the licenses to come back. I review the information, and then I give you a list. You don't see the actual renewal forms. I give you a list, and it lists what type of license the establishment holds, if they have an entertainment license and what that consists of, and if there are any violations that I have received from DLC in the past year. And we do those sporadically as they arrive. Sometimes it takes 3 and sometimes 4 meetings, and they're often establishments who don't provide the information back until the last minute, and you have had to have special meetings to get them in under the deadline so that they make it to DLC before the end of their licensing period. So what I'm proposing would be, instead of bringing them to you in bunches, that you review the entire listing, and I believe right now there are 77 liquor license holders, on the condition that they provide the documentation that I review and go forward with, rather than bringing them to you meeting by meeting. This would all happen up front. By doing it this way, it sort of streamlines it a bit. Many of the large communities in Vermont do it this way. DLC appreciates it because then they're receiving the licenses as I receive them and review them, and they're not waiting for select board meetings and gathering. This way they would get them more on a regular basis and would have more time rather than receiving them towards the end of the period and feel the time crunch to get them done and approved before the deadline.
Anybody on the board have any questions or comments?
No, go ahead.
I'm going to make the same comment. We discussed this at agenda setting, and I worry about, because I know I particularly mentioned the Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
They do come to meetings
Mm-hmm.
to talk about, specific establishments every once in a while. And I worry about leaving them out of the loop by doing this, let's make the decision now, and when the people get the paperwork back. I just feel somehow it's leaving people like the Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition or somebody else that has an issue with an establishment, and maybe I'm missing something that it doesn't leave them out of the loop, but I feel like we're missing a step.
It doesn't need to leave them out of the loop. Before the applications come to you, they are approved by many of the department heads, including fire and police department. I would be happy to include them in that for their review before they go to you, and they would also know what meeting they're scheduled for, and they could attend if they were interested.
John?
We, as acting liquor commissioners, we can bring this up. We can bring an establishment up at any time we want.
Yeah, if there's an issue, we can.
If there's an issue. So I don't think anybody can be left out of the loop on this, because we can even have an emergency meeting and still do the same thing. We're not leaving, so if anybody does have a concern, they can bring it to us, and we can, because that's the power that we have with the liquor commission. So.
Anybody else on this side?
No,
I want to say, I think, Kate, you made a really important point, and I've had numbers of conversations in the past couple of years with the Brattleboro Prevention Coalition, and I feel like their feedback and their input is a really important one for this community, especially in the face of growing concerns around addiction. So if there was a way to make sure that they were notified up front, that would feel really good to me, and just give them the opportunity to weigh in. Maybe they would choose that, maybe they wouldn't, but I think flagging it as an intentional opportunity for them is an important one. I support that.
Goes on board?
And I do work closely with Cassandra at the coalition.
She's great.
She and I are on the phone often, and it's because of the coalition that we now have the additional addendum to the liquor license for new applicants that ensure that the licensees have a valid sales policy and abide by the rules. If they are questioned by the police and the police need more information, it's all built right in there, which is a condition of their license that they need to cooperate. And there are other built-in restrictions on that also, and that's because of the coalition's work. So we've worked closely together, and I will be happy to include them in anything that we do.
So over the course of the time that I've been on the board, I've heard concern about the number of licenses that we have and the concentration of businesses that are furnishing alcohol within the town. It's it's one of the themes that runs through the annual presentation of these liquor license applications. And I guess I'm a little concerned about the switch in procedure, because rather than waiting for an establishment to show diligence and to turn in their application so that we can consider it when they're ready and they've got it together, essentially we would be approving all of the applications, or all the licenses at the front end, contingent then on the businesses deciding to get around to turning in their paperwork. And I haven't really found it to be a burden over the 4 years I've been on the board to deal with these in groups as the establishments get their applications in. And I'm wondering whether it's really been a burden on the town clerk's office or on DLC, such that we would want to sort of shift that presumption that they've got their license as soon as they turn in their paperwork, rather than waiting for them to turn in their paperwork.
Well, doing it the proposed way does make it for a smoother running operation, because you process them as they arrive rather than wait and do them after each meeting. I know DLC likes it when they come in on a regular flow rather than in bunches, but it's your decision.
I think because these are renewals, and if there's an issue, we're likely to hear about it long before the renewal comes in. I think that the fact that it will simplify things, and it is a model that other towns use, and that I think that's perfectly capable of keeping, as she already does, but keeping the Prevention Coalition involved. I think we should accept her, what's the word? Accept her proposal.
So I don't see anything in the memo that suggests any form of motion. So are you looking for some particular approval, or are you just intending, depending on how this discussion goes,
Should do it anyway.
to bring them all to us 4 weeks
Just
from
go
now?
ahead and do it.
I think I was looking for your approval.
I can help there. We'd like a motion of the select board so we know your official decision as a body.
On the second, or actually third paragraph of Annette's memo, I move that all current licensees be presented to the liquor commissioners at one meeting for renewal, regardless of whether they have returned their renewal documents yet, on the condition that renewal documents are received by the town clerk's office and are complete.
All right, so if I can make an amendment to that motion, Dave? Can I make an amendment and that you would move that all current licensees be presented to the liquor commissioners at one meeting for renewal? I'll go slower, I'm sorry. Regardless of whether they have returned their renewal documents yet, and that the motion made by the liquor commissioners to approve will be on the condition that renewal documents are received by the town clerk's office and are complete. That's okay?
Yeah, good.
All right.
So nothing slips by.
All right.
Can I ask a question?
Kate?
I just want to make sure I understand how this works. All the establishments that have liquor licenses, do they come to you and say, I want a liquor license? Or when we get them on the renewal list, is it just, oh, they've had one before, so we automatically think they're going to be renewed? Do you know what I mean?
For renewals, you're just talking renewals.
Yeah.
They send in their renewal forms.
Okay, so they
I don't
actually-
see them all, but they actually send in the forms.
Okay, and are these the forms?
That go to the state.
Yes.
Okay, but we won't, what I'm saying is, if we don't see the forms, or we won't see the completed forms.
No, you never have.
We have.
But where's the initial list coming from? Do you know?
I believe the change in procedure is that at a meeting in February, we're going to see a list of everybody who had a liquor license in the previous year, and we're going to be asked to approve them all at once, contingent on them getting the paperwork in.
Okay, but these are not necessarily people that are going to actually want a liquor license, because we haven't asked them whether they want it. We're just assuming because they already have one that they're going to want it.
That was
Is
the concern
right?
I expressed.
Right, okay, that's what I'm...
Generally, about 98% come back to be renewed of the ones that we send out from the previous year.
Is the board all clear?
Yes.
Is there anybody who's in attendance who has any questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Cartwright. Just come to the mic.
No,
No,
they
the
have to come to
microphone
mic.
is what you, just so that they can hear you on TV.
Because of the thousands and thousands of people.
Just to be clear, does this board have the authority to reject the renewal?
Totally.
Okay.
Yes.
Because
Oh, yeah.
from my seat, it sounded like the motion would be to approve them all. So it sounds like you're taking away your ability to reject them. It's one thing if they come back complete, but does that mean you would approve it just because it's complete?
We can
So
reject them
I would-
anytime.
I would review the language and then make sure you're not boxing yourself into approving all of the applicants.
Peter?
Thank you. Annette, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's 3 separate ways in which one of the establishments on the list might not be renewed for a year. One would be if they received part of the blanket approval that's being discussed here tonight, and then they don't follow up with the proper paperwork, so their license lapses.
Correct.
A second would be if there's a reason for the board itself in its consideration to have concerns that are sufficient about anyone on the list, that they pull them off the list and give the blanket approval to all those that are in good standing, but follow some other procedure to either reject or further vet the one that you've pulled off. And the third would be if staff chooses to do that. If there's been enough issues over the course of a year that we have sufficient concerns, that we would bring the list to the board in a form that says, these many establishments are recommended for approval, but we have a concern about 1 or 2. So I think that the safeguard is still there for an establishment that needs a more thorough review to receive it.
And ultimately, the final decision comes from DLC.
Right.
Now, can I ask another question?
Kate?
And maybe, I don't mean to be dense on this, I'm just trying to think it through. If we approve somebody, conditionally approve somebody, and the paperwork comes to you and something has happened between the time we said
Right.
yes, but how does somebody flag that? You know what I mean? How does
I would.
that work? Okay. And would it come back to us, or what happens?
I would think so. I mean, if,
Any flag comes
Right.
back to us.
yes.
Right.
At any point in the year, no
Right.
matter where we are in the process, it would come back to you if there were a flag, either from the police department,
Right.
myself, or from something.
Right. So it's not like somebody in the town clerk's office gets it, stamps it,
No.
and it goes off without, I'm just trying to make sure that
No.
we're doing our responsibility as
No.
liquor commissioners.
And before you see them, before you see that list, as happens annually, it will have been approved by, it goes to the treasurer's office to be sure there are no outstanding taxes. It goes to the grants department to be sure that they're up to speed on their loans. It goes to the police department to see if they have any concerns, because of all of the departments, probably the police are the most familiar with a lot of the establishments. So it'll have the approval of the police department, and it goes to the fire department too. Fire department probably may not have as many concerns because they review the establishment before it opens. But if it's deteriorated since it's open and they have issues, then they have the it's all gone to them, so they have the power to make objections also.
When I was just looking through the notes I took extensive notes at the liquor commissioner training, and the first thing I wrote down is that the yearly review of all licenses is the easy way to end licenses if we're having problems.
And we can
That's
do that
really-
any time of the
We
year.
can do it any time, but and the annual review is just a real easy way to solve a problem.
And we've also had our community come before the select board
Exactly.
with concerns
With
during
concerns.
public participation, so
Right.
that's always an avenue.
Right. So I think all avenues are still open.
Does the board want additional language just clarifying that liquor commissioner review is part of the process? Because we can add that to the motion if you like.
I don't.
You want that, or you don't?
I don't think it's necessary. I think the more wordy it gets, the more convoluted it gets.
I mean, the idea is to a smoother workflow.
Right. So.
All right. So the motion as it stands is that all current licensees will be presented to liquor commissioners at one meeting for renewal, regardless of whether they've returned their renewal documents yet, with final approval of the license further on condition that renewal documents are received by the town clerk's office and are complete. Did I word that exactly the same, Jen?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. All right. Is there any further discussion from anybody on the board? Anybody who's in attendance?
I think, Annette, Kate wants to keep you here.
I'm so confused about this.
Well, come on down and we'll talk about it.
That's okay.
I just,
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Nay.
No.
That carries 3-2.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready for a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next matter on the agenda is convening as water and sewer commissioners. We're looking for a motion to convene as water and sewer commissioners. So moved. We have a motion to convene as water and sewer commissioners. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Greetings.
Good evening.
Recognize you, Mr. Parrott.
It's that other character.
I'm Mike Schramm with Will Tanner and Associates.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So the first item on the Water and Sewer Commissioners is approval of the loan application, the State Revolving Loan Fund, the Black Mountain Gravity Sewer Line.
Okay. So John O'Connor also, he's here for comment on this. He's reviewed this loan. Mike Schramm is the lead engineer for Hoyle Tanner. What we're talking about tonight is a Black Mountain Gravity Sewer project. The Water and Sewer Commissioners are being asked to consider approving the application from the Revolving Loan Fund, and that's for pollution control projects from the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. And that's to construct a gravity feed line at Black Mountain Road. The application request is for $960,000. It is to install an 8-inch sewer line, gravity feed, using trenchless technology and abandoning the existing wastewater pump station and pump line, force main, that was installed in 1976. The Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation Facilities Division has reviewed the design plans and the specifications and authorized us to proceed with the bid. The project is currently been listed as it's been posted for bid, advertised for bid, I should say, and it started last Friday. The project's supposed to go, it's actually, the bid starts last Friday, and we'll open bids on February 19th. And then we'll recommend an award of the project in February, notice to proceed in April, and then construction, and hopefully we're done within 10 weeks in late June. So with that, I don't know if John would like to speak about the terms of the revolving loan itself, so everybody's familiar with what the motion is and what we're voting on.
Okay, I can talk about the loan terms. As Steve said, this is an application for $960,700 out of the Clean Water Revolving Fund. This is actually an additional application to an existing loan. Originally, a loan was approved for $56,000 for the final design. So this is actually just increasing that loan value by the $960,700. So the total loan amount for this project will be $1,016,700. We don't have the terms for the loan yet, other than we know it's a 20-year repayment period. Many times these loans carry a 0% interest rate and a 2% administrative fee. the 2% administrative fee is basically just a 2% interest rate. So tonight, we're asking the board to approve the loan application and sign the loan application, and to approve an amendment to the engineering agreement. And that amendment is to increase the engineering agreement by $111,700 for the additional engineering associated with the project. And that only needs your approval, and the authorized representative for the town can sign that document.
So, Steve or John, this is still part of the original wastewater treatment plant money.
Yes, it is. This
Except
is
you're
the
asking
original under the bond authorization of the $32.8 million. This is under the same blanket of that project. The reason that this project is behind the rest of the project is because, as you recall, there was a pump station, and then it was thought that we could go with a gravity feed line, eliminate the pump station, and additional cost of rebuilding pump stations in the future. So that's why this one comes a little bit, after the final project. But it's all under the same blanket, under that same amount of money.
So, as I recall, we're still under, even with this additional money, we're still under our original bond.
That's right. And we had the discussion at a previous meeting that, we're not really sure where it'll land.
Right.
But there was approximately $400,000 under what the bonding amount was. That we're under with this project. And also, maybe Mike, you can speak to it a little bit. There's some pretty good contingencies in this plan also. It's pretty conservative, and we want to be conservative, and we were all along.
Right.
But maybe, Mike, you could
we do
touch
have
on
a contingency factor built into the construction cost estimate that is represented in the loan amount for the $960,000.
Other questions or comments from anybody on board? Steve, since we're dealing with the approval now for the loan for this gravity-fed line, could you speak a little bit more to the cost savings that we gain from switching from a pump station to gravity-fed line? Why did we make that decision?
Well, it became obvious once Hoyle Tanner reviewed the options of the gravity feed versus the pump station. Number one would be a pump station at this time would almost be $1 million or close to $800,000 to $900,000 if we were to rebuild just the wastewater pump station itself. Then we have ongoing costs with operators checking the station, upgrading pumps on a regular basis. We have electrical cost. Could be chemical costs depending on what how well the station is running. So in the long term, the town will receive this benefit over and over again. Pump stations are normally designed for approximately 20 years. So we'd be facing this plus the inflation of 20 years from now. So there's a savings over and over and over. It's long-term. Once you remove this pump station, then it's gravity feed, just like most homes. There are some homes that have pumps, but just a gravity feed to the wastewater treatment plant.
And do people realize that the new boring technique that you're using does not disrupt I-91 at all?
Probably not. I mean, the technology
it's not supposed to.
It's a good question. That's what's unique about this process. We've done it on Putney Road. We put a water main in, and there was very little disruption to the businesses up there or to traffic. It's quite a process. In this case, we're on one side of I-91, and we're actually drilling underneath I-91, and we've received our approvals from the state and federal government to do so. And also, it will require a sleeve to protect that line, and then in the event that the line did fail in years to come, it could be pulled out of the sleeve and then renewed. But it's pretty good.
Yeah, the project includes advancement of a 24-inch steel casing underneath the highway, and then an 8-inch gravity sewer within that 24-inch casing.
The pipe itself is 8 inches,
The gravity sewer, the
that's right.
carrier pipe.
and that's adequate.
And that's another thing that the engineering did, is they evaluated and looked at the, SIT and all the homes and potential build-out of that area, and it has plenty of capacity for the future.
And I saw in the supporting paperwork that there are 2 easements that we've negotiated. So can you talk to us about that very briefly?
Yes, we've negotiated 2 easements. One's with the Mountain Home Park, which is on the westerly side of the project, and then also with the VFW post. And those are temporary easements and permanent easements. And I wish to thank both of the parties for being so cooperative with us. And Bob Fisher has reviewed all those easements, and they've been submitted to the state also for their review.
And then, John, if you could just briefly, my recollection is that for the main part of the borrowing for the wastewater treatment plant, we wound up having to borrow from 2 different sources. One of them was a cheaper source of funding, and then that funding sort of became limited. And so we wound up having to borrow other money at a higher rate. What are we borrowing from here? And if you could talk a little bit about that history.
Well, there were 3 different funding sources. 2 from the Clean Water Revolving Fund, actually 3, including this one, from the Clean Water Fund, and those are the least expensive loans we can get. The largest funding was $13,500,000 from what they call RZ bonds, Recovery Zone Economic Development Bonds, and those carried a much higher interest rate than the loans from the Clean Water Revolving Fund. So our biggest borrowing for this project, unfortunately, was from the RZ bonds, although the Clean Water Fund provided, when taken together, provided the bulk of the funding for the project.
And I understand that initially we had been hoping to be able to fund the entire $32 million with the clean water funds, but then the state lowered the limit for what we could borrow, and so we had to borrow money at higher interest rates, and we couldn't convince Montpelier to give us the better rate.
That's correct.
Is that right, Mr. DeGray?
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing that up.
Sore subject.
You actually were on the same wavelength, because my question would be is that our legislators thought it fit that just before we were going to do our project that they changed the requirement on a revolving loan fund and cost the Brattleboro users a considerable amount of money because we had to go out and find another funding source. My question, which David was asking, I thought we were actually maxed out on money we could get from the revolving loan fund. Therefore, I'm not understanding how we can get $900,000 for this portion of it.
I could speak to that.
Yeah, Mike.
It's actually a benefit of this component of the project being delayed into a next fiscal year. You may recall that the project was capped, the main part of the treatment plant project was capped.
Right.
There were 3 years in a row that the project spanned where the components were, it was a $4 million limit set for 3 years, so $12 million total. The fact that the Black Mountain component has pushed out further has allowed for this opportunity for additional availability of SRF funds for this project.
And my understanding, when you take a loan from the revolving loan fund, the repayment doesn't start for 2 years after the completion of the project. Is that still true today?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
All right. I think we've covered everything relating to this
Flow.
application. Yeah, flow. I just want to make sure on page 3 of the application itself, is that just a supporting document, or is that something that's not something we're signing now? If we can just change the authorized signature for the town, for the new town manager.
Yes.
That's on page 3.
Yep. It's right here.
So that's on the second line.
Yep.
And down in the alternate's name. Is there any further inquiry, any further discussion about this revolving loan fund application approval? Oh, 1 minute, Mr. Times. Mr. Schramm, the 111 that's going to Hoyle Tanner, part of that is also contingency, as I recall?
There are several components. It's not contingency. One of them is an amendment to complete final design, bid phase services, and then construction phase. Construction phase is made up of both construction administration and also to have someone on-site, resident project representative on-site. So there's not a contingency factor, so to speak. It's made up of those 4 factors.
All right. Anything else from the board? Mr. Dimes?
I'm Kurt Dimes. I live in Brattleboro. I would be glad to know, and I think the general public and all present would be glad to hear something about the trenchless technology. I think that involves a kind of a underground robot, and I'd be glad if Steve or Mr. Schramm would explain it a little bit. It's very interesting.
Do you want to take the lead, or would you like me to describe it? Go ahead. It's a horizontal drilling process. As part of this project, the town has already advanced a 4-inch pilot bore underneath the highway in the general route of where the sewer line's going, as a means to, again, sort of confirm the feasibility of getting through that material. The project works whereby it's horizontal drilling, and the hole is reamed out over various passes of a drill bit that is pulled back and forth in a horizontal manner. Again, the casing that we're going to be installing is a 24-inch casing. So you start off with, like I said, there was a 4-inch hole advanced. There'd be an upsizing, a reaming out of that hole, and then to a point where that would facilitate them allowing to pull back a 24-inch casing. Once that is in, the gravity sewer pipe itself would be installed within that casing on spacers that maintain the slope that's necessary through that steel casing. So that's essentially the manner in which it would be constructed.
How long is this you do without a trench?
The depth of the directional drilling is just shy of 700 feet.
That's terrific.
And we have open cut components of the construction on both sides. That totals, if you total both sides together, we have 570 linear feet of open cut sewer construction, and then just shy of, 660 linear feet of directional drilling underneath the highway.
Yeah. Any further discussion? So we're ready for a motion to approve the loan application.
To approve a loan application in the amount of $960,700 to the State of Vermont Revolving Loan Fund to complete the Black Mountain Gravity Sewer Line.
We have a motion to approve the loan application in the amount of $960,700. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Then we're ready for a motion to approve the contract amendment with Hoyle Tanner.
I'll do it. To approve a contract amendment with Hoyle Tanner and Associates for completion of the Black Mountain Gravity Sewer Line as presented.
We have a motion to approve the $111,000 contract amendment with Hoyle Tanner. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda, well, I'm sorry, the next matter is, we're looking for a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next matter on the agenda, under unfinished business, is representative town meeting article for the Futures Committee. Mr. Agave, do you want to speak to that? Rod, I see you, and we'll call on you next, please.
Mr. Agave, town meeting member. How do you do, Mr. Elwell?
Fine, thank you.
You have before you pretty much the same motion, the same paper you had 2 weeks ago, except that I added the complete motion as it was passed, and which was a motion establishing the ad hoc Committee of the Future and directing it to return at town meeting in March with a more complete description of what it will be doing, and that will be in the meeting packet.
Thank you, Spoon. Anything else you want to say right now?
That is all.
All right, so I recognize Mr. Francis because I understand that some concern has been expressed about this Futures Committee and potential conflict and ambiguity between its role and the role of the Planning Commission. If you want to come there or to the mic, whatever you prefer. Excellent. We're happy to have you sit there.
Good evening, I'm Rod Francis, I'm the Planning Director, and I'm here to discuss the memo that you find in your packet. When Mr. Agave saw it to have this article attached, or this article for warning included in the town meeting packet, I was made aware of that and began to review the language that Mr. Agave is suggesting with reference to the purpose and scope of the Planning Commission. And so my memo outlines the similarity in the purpose statement that the Committee of the Future has that Mr. Agave is suggesting with the statutory obligations of the Planning Commission, which in addition to preparing the municipal town plan has status before the Act 250 Commission and in the Public Service Board under certain circumstances. And so my question for you to consider at this moment is whether your support of the article going forward, as Mr. Agave suggests, is takes into account the similarity and the potential for confusion down the road.
Anybody from the board have any comments? I have something, I'll wait. Anybody from the board?
May I respond to that, please?
Yes, please.
What's before you is to place on the agenda for the town meeting something that they asked to have on the agenda. And and now I don't understand what's being introduced here. It's almost as if you're saying that you, as the select board, can deny or overrule the town meeting itself from having something on its agenda that it wishes to put on its agenda. Now, I don't know about the legitimacy. It's normal, I think you're a lawyer, and when there's an issue, usually if there's new information that you think may color the outcome of something, you usually inform the other people, the defendant or the plaintiff, whoever it is, beforehand. In fact, that's usually required. And now I find myself here learning at this very last moment that there has been memos passed and discussions held and opinions shared, none of which was shared with me, or, as far as I know, the town moderator, who himself is both a moderator and a lawyer. So now all these points you're raising may be legitimate points, and they should be discussed at town meeting when the body hears the motion that it asked to hear.
I'll call on you, Kate, if you're busy reading. Kate.
I'm sorry, I was reading. Kate?
I'm looking at the resolution.
Right, that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
I'm looking at the resolution that was passed by town meeting. And it says, if I'm reading what I'm reading, that the committee is supposed to report back to town meeting in 2015 on its recommendations.
That's
Is that correct? Do you have, I'm just going to ask you, do you have a report yet?
Yeah, it is actually written. I just haven't dotted a few I's and crossed a few T's, but yes, it's been written. That was the work of the ad hoc committee of the future this last fall.
Okay, so the moving forward, you'll give this report of town meeting, and then this is what you want to ask the town meeting to do, which is to continue this ad hoc committee, and not make it ad hoc.
It's what town meeting is saying it wants to do. I am not asking, I asked town meeting last June to form an ad hoc committee to bring back a complete proposal on a more permanent, for whatever that means, but in March. And they said, yes, we'd like to do that, and we'd like to see that. And so they will.
Well, I, with all due respect, I heard that presentation last week, that you're just presenting back to us what town meeting asked, but that's not what I read.
No, I'm not.
Wait, if I can finish, please. That's not what I read, and that's not what I remember from what happened at town meeting last year. I think that the request that you're making actually goes well beyond the scope of what you proposed under other business last year. All that really was asked for at town meeting under other business when it was adopted was that the Futures Committee would report back this year. And so part of me thinks that if you want to make a permanent committee of town meeting, that either that should be done through the charter or it should be done through a petition. But I'm a little uncomfortable voting at this point to add this language.
Have you read the town charter or consulted with the town attorney about the contents of the charter?
I have read the town charter, yes, sir.
And you did see it where it says specifically that representative town meeting has the power to form committees as it sees fit from time to time.
I did see that.
And
I know that.
and what what exactly are you saying here? You feel that your interpretation is that the town meeting only wanted to see a piece of paper describing what it would be and not have a chance to actually form it?
I've just read from the motion last year, which says that there'll be a report back, and that's all that it presents. And you're interpreting that to mean that a permanent committee will be formed, but I don't read that, and I don't remember that being discussed. That's correct. Anybody else from the board?
I'm still reading it again.
Rod?
I just want to emphasize that the department and the Planning Commission's interest in the matter is in response to the suggestion that the ad hoc committee become a permanent committee, and that at that point the purpose and the scope of a permanent committee of town meeting relative to other existing statutorily recognized bodies such as the Planning Commission became of interest. And so that is the basis for the memo before you, and the comparison between the language that we have here from Mr. Agave as to what the purpose of the committee would be, and what we know the purpose and the scope of the Planning Commission to be, because it's identified in statute. Moreover, while I understand that the Select Board has their power to operate the general fund, basically through the budget, which is approved by representative town meeting on an annual basis, it's of concern that with limited resources, the formation of a permanent town meeting committee could reasonably be expected to call on resources. And I would, with all due respect, suggest that we don't have adequate resources to duplicate this function.
And that would be something you would raise at town meeting if there was anything in the proposal asking for funds, which you don't know.
That's, I'm
All
not,
right, all right,
yes.
wait a second,
Yes.
wait a second. You know, we're not going to have dialogue back and forth. Anybody on the board? Dave?
Yeah, I think we could spend an awful lot of time talking about this. I mean, to me, it's really clear that the town meeting expects a report back, and that part of it was bringing forth a proposal for the establishment of the Futures Commission. And I think that's the end of our work here. And I think that that should go on the agenda, and we should move on to the rest of our business and let the town meeting deal with it once they have the report. The town meeting meeting members ask for the report, and they'll get it. And that'll be the end of it.
Anybody else on the board?
I would like to say. So I think, Mr. Agave, you raise interesting questions about process. And I just want to say that I'm sitting with some of those questions. At the same time, the content of Mr. Francis's memo as a select person, I think raises some really important considerations, and I understand you're not in possession of that memo. So that's something just for us to think about. But I am concerned about the initial intent of what got raised at last year's meeting being expanded upon in some way that I'm still sort of grappling with.
And I feel that...
Hold on, wait a second, please. Anybody else on the board?
I would like to hear the response to that first, before if I said anything else.
All right. Anybody else on the board? All right, Spoon.
My response is that, not having seen anything being referred to, but I'd be more than happy to read it through carefully, discuss it, probably with the town moderator, probably with the ad hoc committee, perhaps the town attorney, and attempt to address every one of the issues in the report that will be provided to town meeting members.
So that's why I was wondering if we could table this until Mr. Agave did have a chance to read that, and because we still have time to add it.
All right. We'll certainly consider tabling it. We should be clear, the memo that Mr. Francis is referring to is included in the publicly available select board materials. This item was noticed under old business, unfinished business on the agenda, and the meeting materials have all been publicly available since Friday. They may even all be online, if I'm not mistaken. They're all online. And so there's a memo that includes there's a packet of materials online, publicly accessible, that includes both your memo and your proposal, and Mr. Francis's memo addressing it. So
Mr. Chair,
it's all been publicly available.
Given that you were aware that this new information, in your mind, could completely change the complexion of the issue, would it not have been minimally courteous to have informed me about what was going on?
This memo didn't change my view at all. Mr. Dimes?
Chairman, I think the board is making a mountain out of a molehill. As you admitted that the content of the motion was to, at Representative Town Meeting June, was to report back. Yours is an administrative function here, not to debate the merits of the commission, but simply to put it on the agenda for a Representative Town Meeting.
Anybody else have any comments? Mr. DeGray.
Being in retirement, someone needs to help clarify for me in terms of what happened last year. I did not read the packet, so some of the things are very vague to me as I've been trying to pick them up. But if town meeting asked for a report back, that is profoundly different than having a report back or having an article question where there is action that has to be taken with an article question. The report could be given in the packet, which I would think that it would be, and then could be further discussed under other business. I think if this is placed as an article question, is it, and I don't know the answer to this, but I always thought that there had to be some sort of action with a article question that's placed on the ballot. And I think that might be overstepping what the original intent was, to have a report back to the body and then get direction from the body as to where to go from there after that report.
As the board, is there anybody else who's in attendance who wants to speak to this? As the board want to proceed?
I would like to give Mr. Spooney a chance to read this through and discuss it and table it until our next meeting.
You want to make a motion to table it to January 29th? That's where we're going to finalize the warning for town meeting.
I'll go with what the board wants to do, but I'd like to make that motion.
All right, there's a motion to table the proposed town meeting warning article until the June 29th meeting. Is there any further discussion?
You said June 29th.
January 29th. I like the cold too. So, Jan?
Spoon, will that give you enough time?
I would like to add, I don't believe, and I'd be willing to go out on a limb to say, that there was not a single person present at that last town meeting who didn't fully understand what was expected to happen, that they were going to get a proposal to form the committee of the future. And given that, and given all that I've spoken to the untold numbers of people who nobody saw it any other way in this town, as far as I know, until now it seems. And those people seem to be limited to you on that chair, at that table. I can't help thinking that what seems to be going on, and I don't know why, it's almost a contest, what Mr. Gartenstein has laid it out, of power between the select board and town meeting. What Mr. Gartenstein is suggesting is that the select board controls the agenda of town meeting, which are the people of the town. It's a very significant question to ask. I'm actually very glad that it's being asked about, do the people of this town control their own agenda? Can they talk about what they want to talk about, or is the select board the gatekeeper? Does the select board set the agenda for the people of this town?
Jan?
So we have a meeting scheduled on January 29 to approve warnings. If we're having debate at that meeting, the warnings are not going to be finalized for approval. We may need a meeting in between, or we may need a meeting on January 30th to then approve whatever happens at the January 29 meeting.
Good point.
My sense is that there's one or two articles at this point, or 3 articles that remain open, and that we will be able to finish all the business on the 29th, including all the wording at that meeting, without the need for another meeting. That's the plan. Any further discussion? Donna?
Just one comment. I want to say on behalf, for myself and also on behalf of the select board, that I see us as a body that is certainly welcoming of fruitful conversations about process. And so it seems like a conversation worth having. I find it unfortunate that your frame involves the suggestion that it's a power struggle, and I see it very differently. So perhaps you and I can have a conversation prior to our sit-down.
But nothing was about process here.
We have a motion to table. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of tabling the unfinished business on this representative town meeting article until January 29th, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, abstaining?
I'm not opposed.
All right, that carries 4-1.
Next item.
Next item on the agenda is the financial report. Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, David. In the packet is the financial report for the month of December, 6 months ending December.
Hold it, John, I gotta get ready for this.
Get ready, John. We're halfway through the fiscal year, and the general fund, after making adjustments and prorating the expenses for insurance, debt service, and human service payments, the budget would stand at 46.2%. So we're doing well relative to where we would expect to be. The utilities fund is at 54.5% of its budget. Parking's at 45.7%. In utilities, the fund is over budget primarily because of the outfall pipe, which was a federally funded project, FEMA project, and that was not budgeted for. The Police and Fire Facilities Fund showed expenditures of $17,162 for the first half of the year. The loan fund, as of the end of December, had $4,090,176 in outstanding loans issued through the town's various programs. 3 of the loans had payments that were overdue, and 2 of the loans were in default, but they were fully reserved. So there's no further exposure to the programs for those 2 loans. The program income report shows that we had $420,586 in available funds for additional grants and loans. And finally, the grant report showed that we had 45 active grants and 10 grants that were in the application process.
Anybody on the board have any questions about the financial report?
Yeah.
David?
John, you talk about the town's various loan programs and that we have $420,586 in available funds for grants and loans. Can you give me a ballpark, very general idea of how much of that would be available for direct grants if we wanted to, for instance, support proposal to expand local business or something along those lines?
There's, let's see what we have here. Loans. Grants. But we do have a few grants. They're grants for apartments and homes. There's grants for, I guess that's basically it. Apartments and homes is our grant fund, and that's a relatively small amount of money for that fund. There's $15,000 allocated to that fund, and there's $13,531 that's left available for those grants. Most of the money is used for loans, and it's a revolving loan fund. So, as Gordon said earlier tonight, this fund keeps turning over and revolving, and we're able to make additional loans as the loans are paid back. And so we have several loan programs. We have one for rental housing. We have one for disaster relief. We have one for small business, and that's the one that Gordon had. And we have a town-funded program for larger revolving loans, such as the Brooks House.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions from anybody on the board? Anybody in attendance have any questions about the financial report? right, then the next matter on the agenda is a public hearing, the first of two, on petitions for charter amendments. 3 petitions were presented. One for youth vote amendment. One that has a series of proposed amendments to the charter, listed as Article 2, as set forth in the materials that have been circulated. And then another one that's listed as Article 3. So we will call the public hearing for January 20, 2015 on the proposed charter amendments to order. Anybody want to speak on the proposed charter amendments? Mr. Dimes? Not yet.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kurt Dimes from Brattleboro. These amendments are drafted in the spirit of voter participation. I think we all know that voter rolls, that is, voter turnout is down very slowly and very low for many years. People in Brattleboro are like in other places. It's just unfortunately not invigorated about their town governments and about participating in town governments. A week or two ago, there was an article in the paper, again, we see this article every year, in which Annette encourages people to run for office. Even our low-level offices at the RTM and on our committees are many vacancies, indicating that people are not interested in helping or speaking to their town government. And so all of these amendments are drafted to increase voter participation in government and in increasing their turnout at elections. The youth vote on the first petition is for 16 and 17-year-olds to be allowed to vote in town elections on town matters only. And we could think of that as a learner's permit for citizenship. To my mind, it's an open and closed case after somebody proposed it to me and our attorney that the youth vote should apply to anyone who pays taxes. And teenagers pay taxes. They have jobs. And to tax them without giving them representation in the town is taxation without representation. That was the byword of the American Revolution. I don't see how we can deny them the vote on that account. And with respect to their educational capabilities, I quote the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Any person who has completed the 6th grade possesses sufficient literacy, comprehension, and intelligence to vote in any election. That closes the case for me. I'm compelled to support youth vote on those 2 grounds. And the second petition promotes a budget veto. You might call it a budget veto. There's been so much fuss about our budget the last few years, and many people were telling Brattleboro Common Sense that we needed to put the budget in front of the people, and I think for a vote. And that would be very touchy, because I think people just don't ever vote for spending money. But to give them a chance, a little bit more of a chance to have a referendum on articles of $2 million or more is a good compromise. And that's provided in petition number 2. Then also in petition number 2 is a restoration of the the way that people are allowed to vote for ordinances in town. Until 2012, we had a system by which people could bring ordinances to a vote, could call for a vote, and those could be voted any time of year. By a series of regrettable mistakes, in 2011, the RTM voted for amendments. I think they didn't understand what they were doing, or they were too tired, but they voted for amendments which effectively put the RTM, the representative town meeting, in a position of gatekeeper on the public's agenda. This is in Section 3, no, Article 3, Section 2 of our charter. It is called Powers of the People. And it presents now this text. The select board or school directors, upon receipt of such petition, shall place the article on the warning for the next representative town or school district meeting. The way our charter reads now, since 2012, the power of the people is to first vote on something after the representative town meeting gets a chance to reject it. It goes on, and if you look at the handout that anyone can get from in front of our esteemed Executive Secretary, Jan, it says in the subsection 2, representative town meeting, representative town meeting. And then in section 3, a binding article passed by the representative town meeting shall be acted on by all the voters. So people can only vote on these things after they are approved by representative town meeting. And this is in a section of our charter called Powers of the People. It was just a mistake. People go through that process of the petition to have a chart, to have an ordinance, and then the representative town meeting can say, no, that's completely undemocratic. So in Article 2, the amendments that are provided will restore the right to call for votes on ordinances to the way they were before 2012. In the third petition, there are term limits proposed for representative town meeting, RTM. 6 years maximum, after which one must be out of office for 3 years before returning. There's been so much calling for abolition of town meeting, of representative town meeting. I've heard it 100 times. I've talked to, well, more than 700 people just in the collection of the petitions for putting these things on the ballot. A lot of people are saying they don't like representative town meeting. They want to abolish representative town meeting. They don't like the select board. They want to abolish the select board. We need a mayor, and on and on. People are really complaining a lot, and they're looking for extreme measures. But we don't need an extreme measure, in my opinion. And so our attorney and I drafted this legislation which provides a kind of a change, one that allows and promotes more participation. I don't think there's anything wrong with our town government, except maybe that people are not participating, and that brings us back to the theme. We need more voter participation, and term limits will allow that, allow for more people to come to representative town meeting. Another thing that will promote greater turnout at elections is unified elections. We should move our I got representative stuck in my brain. We should move our March town meeting to November. This saves money and provides a greater turnout. This was part of the original proposals of the Charter Review Commission in 2011, and it should be passed. One more thing, the town should provide encouragement for poorer people, people earning low wages, can't afford to vote. They may have to take off an hour or 2 hours from work to go to vote. It is a punitive thing that our society does not provide voting on Saturday or on a holiday as they do in some countries. But if we just allow them to have 2 hours of paid leave, I think the spirit of democracy is well served, and they would be ready to vote in as many numbers as people who make more money. Then 2 more items. Restoring free speech. In 2011, the representative town meeting also voted to restrict the times at which people can call for votes on things. Not just ordinances, but also on statements of public sentiment, commonly called resolutions. We call them resolutions in town here. This was also a mistake, I think. It had been traditional. It's traditional all over New England, and many town charters have that provision so that people can call for votes. And the representative town meeting made it so that you could only do it on March town meeting day. This might sound like it's okay. A lot of people said that's okay. They don't need to call for votes more than one time a year. But people do need to call for votes. They need to call for votes any time of year, especially right after we have our budget discussions. Last year, in May, we had a hubbub about the budget and about the police fire project. And then we had a referendum. And at that time, many people came to me or other members of our organization and said, well, when are you going to have a resolution about the budget or a resolution about the police fire project? If people had wanted to, as I know they did, have an ordinance saying, let's finally establish this police station or against the police station. If they wanted it either way, it could not legally have gone on the ballot until now. How are the people served by that delay? In our charter now, it's enforced that they must delay their opinions. That is not the right way to serve the voice of the people. So our amendment is to change it back so that they can make their voices heard any time of year, especially when it's most topical. And then the last minor provision is to restore the town grand juror, because the town grand juror can enforce the resolutions and ordinances that are passed by the people without placing an additional burden on the police department. If anyone wants to see these details, they're on that sheet there in front of Jan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dimes. Anybody who's in attendance want to speak to these charter amendments? Mr. Agave.
Spoon Agave. It's a lot of amendments. It's a lot to think about. It's all in sort of legalese, and it's not always easy to follow. I'm not quite sure I wholly support everything about every one of them. I do know, however, that our democracy has become very weak by all measurements that you may want to take. The numbers of people who participate have shrunk almost to a point, as we were talking about the DRB, where functions of the government can no longer function. When so few people are participating, the people that are making decisions no longer have legitimacy because they are no longer representing the majority or the will of the people. Writ large, of course, that's perhaps, and it's another argument, the Congress of our own country. Are they representing the will of the people, or is money, or other factors? I support all of these amendments, knowing that some may be shot down in Montpelier. That's okay. They all deserve airing. They are all rooted firmly in democratic process. They are all rooted firmly in the idea of increasing participation. And most, if not all of them, will work. And they all deserve a chance. And I feel like they should all be voted in by the voters of this town, and let the problems get sorted out as we discover them, if we do. But in the meantime, I do have, for instance, I have a question about 16-year-olds voting. But then again, as Mr. Dimes informed me, he said studies show that when a 16-year-old has a chance to vote, some of them, they get excited. It's something that an adult does, and when they do, their own parents will vote, because perhaps they haven't been. But now their child is voting, the parents vote. He also said that studies show that when a 16-year-old votes, when they start voting young, they'll continue voting. That's a good benefit. Whether a 16-year-old is really mature enough to make a good decision, that's arguable. But the impact on the elections is also minimal. So I will support that as well. And I find that in spite of all my questions, the essence of these proposed charter amendments all serve to strengthen our democracy. And that is really vital, because we're getting close to losing it.
Anybody else want to speak to the proposed charter amendments? Mr. DeGray?
You might as well run for the board again.
Well, you know what, I might. I said I wasn't going to, but I think I might change my mind.
There you go.
I have a few days. I always appreciate Mr. Dimes' efforts, although him and I are usually on opposite sides of the fence. I appreciate his energy. And when I think about these 16-year-olds voting, I think that that's covered statutorily, and I don't think that our charter trumps state statute. When I listen to him talk about town meeting and term limits, I guess the first thing I would say to him, he doesn't believe in what he's proposing, because I think, Mr. Dimes, you have been a town meeting member for 8 years, so you didn't self-impose this term limit on yourself after 6 years. Term limits should be self-imposed at our town meeting. I think the biggest concern that I have in the last few years is lack of participation, that we can't get people to return. Never mind, there's self-imposed term limits because people aren't coming back and returning as town meeting members, nor are all these people who are speaking to you taking out petitions to run for a position at town meeting. Everybody is circumventing the process by, I won't take out a petition, it's easier to go to the caucus, so if they need 15 people, I'll just go to the caucus and I'll get put on the board. And that really circumvents my ability to vote for who represents me in my district. The most disappointing thing to me when we talk about democracy and open meetings, in 2 weeks, the BUH District Board will hold their annual meeting. There are 15,000 registered voters in our district. There will be maybe 100 people there. Maybe the biggest district of all, which is Brattleboro, with 8,000 registered voters, there might be 50 people, and that's a high number. So when you talk about opening up the process is open. People choose not to follow the avenues which are there, and I would love more than to see that meeting, which is open to all registered voters, have several thousand people come to that meeting. Yet no one shows up, and then people go, I'm denied, and I don't have access to it. I think and I will leave that at that, there's an opportunity for you to participate. having term limits and saying you need to be off, actually, you're there for 6 years. Institutional knowledge, I believe, is important. And I believe that a good mix of town meeting members is important for the community. And we need to think about that. We need to think about re-engaging, not limiting people who want to participate and saying, okay, you're there for 6 years. And I guess I would have a question as to, all of you are automatically town meeting members. Would the term limit apply to board members as select board members and town school board members? So that would limit anybody serving over 6 years. I guess I would want some clarity on that. The other issue in terms of giving people 2 hours off of paid leave, there are ample opportunities in our community with early voting. We're open on Saturday before the election. I think it's easier to vote now in Brattleboro than it ever has. So forcing someone to pay someone so they could go and vote, I think if it's important and you want to go and vote, you're going to go and vote, and you're going to find a way to go and vote. The conversation a couple of weeks ago with Annette and Spoon about having a tally machine in the town clerk's office, I agree with that. I'm not opposed to an article question of if we have a $2 million vote on a project that it goes to the voters. I'm a taxpayer. We elect these people to represent us. The charter really allows for opportunities for revotes, but I'm not opposed to that. I wish the number might have been a little bit higher rather than 2 million. I thought that was, we buy equipment that's, $500,000. So I do think that number may have been higher, but that's, again, an arbitrary discussion. So when you are going to cast a ballot on this, and I won't be here for your next meeting, you need to really educate yourself and not just look at the big bold print, and do your homework and say, is this in the best interest of our community? And cast your vote. Not an impulse, I can't support that. 16-year-olds, go and do your homework, as you should on all issues that are before the town school and the BUHS budget. They have a big effect on all of us. And so, Mr. Dimes, I will finish with saying I appreciate your effort. I don't know how these will turn out. All I can do is hope that we have a better turnout than we've had in the past. It is actually embarrassing as a resident who tries to vote in every election that our turnout is so low, and that all these people who want this open democracy, I hope, are going to the polls, so that should really raise our number up. Or maybe that's what democracy is. I get to choose not to participate. But it would be great if we were the highest voting community in the state, because we really cared about the issues, rather than say we have participants that we want to limit how much time they can participate. We should applaud the people who have been there for 6, 8, 10, 12 years for giving of their time and concern for the community. And again, there are ample spots open. I think there's still 30 spots for town meeting members. So there's an opportunity for you to serve if you so choose to. And, maybe there should be another charter review, because I thought that there was a good charter committee a few years ago that really did an exhaustive, actually I think it took 3 or 4 years. They put a lot of time and effort into it. And a lot of these issues were talked about, and there were compromises made. And so I compliment that committee, even though I didn't agree with everything, and we're not supposed to. Kurt Dimes and I are not supposed to agree on everything, or me and this board are not supposed to agree on everything. I think we get in trouble if we all look in one direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeGray. Anybody else want to comment on the charter amendments? Anybody on the board ready to talk?
This is just first reading? This is just the first
hearing?
Well,
First hearing.
the statute provides for charter amendments. The statute and the charter provide for charter amendments in different ways. And when a charter amendment is presented by petition, we're required to have 2 public hearings in anticipation of the Australian ballot. Charter amendments also can be presented to town meeting through collection of signatures or through the select board putting it onto town meeting warning. Anybody on the board want to speak to it? Because I'll speak to various issues relating to the charter amendments. I think it's important to maintain some historical perspective about how we got to the current charter, and so I'm going to begin with some procedural related issues. The charter itself provides for review every 15 years of the charter. So in 2008, a charter review committee was formed that consisted of Larry Block, Spoon Agave, Richard Dudman, Harold Dompier, Corwin Elwell, Tom Fennell, Orion Barber, Ronnie Johnson, and Jane Southworth. That committee met for a period of approximately 3 years and reached a series of proposals about potential amendments to the Brattleboro Town Charter. Those potential charter amendments were the subject of, as I recall, 2 full-day meetings, January 22nd and February 5, 2011, at which there were, if I'm counting them correctly, approximately 30 amendments to the charter that were proposed. And there was a significant amount of balancing of various proposals. For example, it used to be that you needed a 20% vote to amend an ordinance or to adopt an ordinance, but it was brought down to 10% as a result of those 2011 amendments, but the timing was narrowed down to once a year. Now, I think what's important to note is that there was a significant opportunity there to study those amendments and to discuss them thoroughly. That really isn't presented, I don't think, by the presentation through the ballot item. I mean, I commend you for going and gathering those signatures, but there was a very healthy 3 or 4 year debate about these previously. I'd also note procedurally that although there are some 8 or 10 proposed amendments to the charter that have been presented by petition, they're only in 3 articles. So there's 1 article for youth vote, and then all the rest of the amendments have to be voted on based upon the way in which they've been presented to the select board. They have to be voted on as groups of amendments. So if you've got concerns about specific amendments, you need to be concerned about voting for any one of these articles because you're voting for them as a block, and that's the way they have to be on the ballot. So that's problematic. Really, a better way to present charter amendments is individually, because that's better practice, because then people can vote on them individually. That's not how they've been presented, and we can't make that change based upon the way they've been presented to select board. So they're going on the ballot as blocks, 16-year-old, and then a block of about 4 amendments, and then another block of 5 or 6. So everybody needs to be aware of that as well. I'm also going to speak briefly because there has been comment here today about the devil being in the detail. I think it's way important before the meeting on the 29th for us to walk through the details of each of the proposed charter amendments. While I represent and I recognize Mr. Dime's view that he believes they're in a democratic tradition. I disagree with that presentation. I've had a chance to read what's been presented through these petitions, and I would just walk through them quickly because they raise for me real concerns based just on the language that's been presented. So I'll walk through those. First of all, while we may support having people vote at age 16, the Constitution of the state of Vermont provides that voter age is 18. So we can vote for that, but that would require a constitutional amendment, as I understand it, to have that adopted as a law in the town of Brattleboro. As to the overspending veto language, the language about referendums for items over $2 million. I have no particular comment on those, but the associated language relating to the number of signatures that need to be collected in that same article calls for reducing the number of signatures from 5% to 250 voters. Previously, the number of signatures that was needed was 10%. It was reduced to 5% in the last charter revisions, and the current state law is that a reconsideration article following town meeting requires 5% of voters to vote for it, and that's under 17 VSA 2661 B, 30 days, 5%. So right now that requires 377 votes, and that's the number of voters that signatures were collected for this this article. I would then note that there's a range of different provisions in the charter relating to the public bringing initiatives, and the ordinance provision is really a very specific one that relates to ordinances, those being laws that the town is imposing on its citizens. For example, the solid waste ordinance, the ordinance relating to sewer and water rates. To the extent that we want to have initiatives that are more generally allowed, the changes that are proposed to the ordinance provision of the charter, I don't think directly relate to that. So I have real concerns about that as it's presented. The provisions relating to term limits on town meeting representatives, what we know is that there's not enough people running to be town meeting members. And town meeting is really an exercise in both participatory and representative democracy. And I won't give my personal experience about first getting elected to town meeting in 1985, but a provision that calls for term limits would essentially prevent people from participating in the town's democracy because they want to go to town meeting, but they would be prohibited from doing so after 6 years. To me, that sounds particularly anti-democratic, and I'm very troubled by that one. I don't know how we would get town meeting members to go to town meeting. The provision here relating to moving elections of town officials from March to November, that was already voted down at the last round of charter amendments, and there's language in here indicating that the vote will be on the first Tuesday of November. But the general election day is not the first Tuesday of November. It's the first Tuesday after the first Monday. So we're now talking under these amendments about having yet another election day when the first Tuesday doesn't follow the first Monday. I question whether it's legal and whether it's advisable to require employers in the town of Brattleboro to give 2 paid hours for voting, because that would require town of Brattleboro businesses to support people going to vote in all of the surrounding towns. That's the way it's worded. I don't think that that's a prudent way to do our business here in the town of Brattleboro either. So I think that there's really serious concerns with the details of all of these articles that have been presented. There may be good sentiments behind them, but I really think that a longer process is necessary, and that real thought analysis needs to be given to the language, and merely saying that we're in favor of these things because it'll make a change is not the way to be dealing with the town's governing document, which is the charter. So I think what we're going to be doing as a select board, I've asked for the department heads and the town manager to look at these proposed articles and these proposed charter revision articles, and we'll be preparing, I expect, some memos over the course of the next days for circulation in advance of the meeting on the 29th. And I would really advise everybody to look very, very carefully at the detail of what's being proposed, because while it may be motivated by good sentiments, I think that it runs real risk of damaging the town's government. Dora?
I know, it's alumni night. Dora Bubelis, Brattleboro. I've been following these amendments going up to petition for a while. I share some of David's concerns with some of the language in the amendments. I have a different concern, and that is that I want to see changes, real changes made in the government, and if some of these go before town meeting, it'll be a long time before they can come back. That being said, I think that it's really important that the select board not be the arbiter about whether or not the voters vote for these things. Ultimately, we know that it's going to go before the legislature. We know that it's going to be looked at by lawyers, and we know that if anything isn't, up to snuff in legal language, it'll get sorted out. What happens if you don't put it on the ballot is a lawsuit and a potential special election at a time when the very people that you would like to show up at an election might not. And then you have a very different result from what you might have if you did it at regular town meeting. So that's just a thought about sort of like what the turnout will be. I, of course, happen to be one of the people who think that this government is seriously flawed. It needs major changes, and these are just some small changes that are being proposed by some people who think that it might help to bring voter turnout. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but again, I think the voters need to be able to be, I think the voters are smart enough to know when something doesn't pass muster, and I don't think we give the voters enough credit if we're not giving them the ability to vote on these.
Thank you, Dora. We should clarify what the process is. The petitions having been presented in this form, these will be on the town meeting day ballot for Australian ballot vote. So what the select board is now trying to do, and what I've tried to do in my comments, is just to try to begin the process of sorting through in detail what they really say. And I think the select board's going to have to take action in order to push out information to the community as a whole about what do these charter amendments mean in the language that they've been presented, but they will be on the ballot. And so there's a public hearing today, and then a public hearing on the 29th, and that's it for formal public hearings. And then they'll be on the ballot on town meeting day, which, Jan, is?
March 3rd.
March 3rd. So they are going to be on the March 3rd ballot. But thanks for your comments. Anybody else before I call on Spoon again? Spoon?
Two points. You had said that you can't change them because they were presented to you as they are. You can't change them because of the way they were worded on the petition. It had nothing to do with being how they were presented to you. what the law says, once you word it on the petition, that's when the power to change stops. It has nothing to do with what it says when it reaches yours. Of course you can't change it. You have no power to do that. As far as term limits go, that's an interesting thing. And I have served for more years than I can remember already on town meeting. I enjoy it. I get more skilled and effective each year that I'm there. And so I do wonder about having term limits on it. However, it's not necessarily a question of democracy, as the chair suggests. If you think about it, we have term limits on the Development Review Board. We have term limits on the Planning Commission. On the federal level, we put term limits on the president. In fact, the founders believed the country would be more democratic by having limits in some places, particularly those places that have power. The point was understanding humanity. When people get into positions of power over longer and longer time, the complexion of government begins to change. And to try and thwart that, they put term limits on the presidency. Exactly why the state established term limits on the DRB and the planning commissions, I'm not entirely sure. I can't speak to it. I could take a guess. I'm not even sure. It seems to work. I guess they are quasi-judicial bodies. Apparently the state, in its wisdom whenever it was, felt that they did not want such people with that power to become entrenched. And that's the idea that Mr. Dimes is after with his proposed amendments. So my point, in short, is it's not equating term limits with democracy is a tricky business. It's not straightforward yes and no.
Any further comments? I'm sorry.
That's okay, David. Sometimes I forget who I am,
We're going to
too.
be here till 10 o'clock anyway.
That's right. Just a quick one. Catherine Turnus in Brattleboro.
Thank you,
I'm a
Catherine.
District 3 rep. I guess I want to clarify on what you had said. I'm a little concerned as a rep of doing this at town meeting and voting for it as a block. I do not want to see that happen. So is this something that is going to happen? We're going to break it out? Is it going to go in as a block for the Australian ballot?
Spoon was correct. I'm not sure how it really differs from what I noted. We received petitions
Right.
that called for 3 items being put on the Australian ballot on March 3rd.
Okay.
And so we have copies of that language that's probably on the table. I probably have 5 copies in my pile here.
So those will be
They're gonna
voted?
be in the way they were presented on those petitions on the Australian ballot with no discussion at town meeting.
Okay, so, but each item will be voted on it separately?
No. So there's a 16-year-old vote article, and then there's 4 or 5 together in a block, and then there's 4 or 5 or 6 more together in another block. That's the way they're going to the voters on March 3rd.
Okay, as a District 3 rep, I find that not acceptable.
That's one of the concerns I articulated. Anybody else wants to speak during this public hearing on these charter amendments? Mr. Dimes.
Can it be changed?
Spoon was right about the clarity or unclarity of the democratic nature of the term limits. after speaking with hundreds of people about their complaints regarding representative town meeting, I can say that to get people to run for the office, we need more than vacancies. We need the people to understand that it is a different kind of body that they are wanting to join. Right now, people don't want to join because they don't like that assembly. They don't like that collection as it is. And they feel that their votes and voices would be lost or ignored. If we have the term limits, then there will be a great number of vacancies, and people can be assured that the character of the assembly will have changed. That's when they will be ready to vote. That's when they will be ready to join. A lot of people would like to, but they don't want to join that group. And that will change if we have the term limits. And then as for the technical changes, we recognize there are some technical changes required. Brattleboro Common Sense attorney Paul Gillis assures me that the state is willing to make those minor changes, just like punctuation and grammar. Sometimes the state will take care of those things without a problem.
Any further comments in the public hearing? Ms. Bavoulis?
Thank you, Dora Boboulis. I just want to apologize because I thought that what was being discussed was whether or not to put it on the ballot. So, but now I'm hearing further discussion, and I just want to advocate and caution the select board to stay neutral. It's one thing to put out information about what each of these means. It's a whole nother thing to take a stand for or against something, and it sort of changes the complexion of what it is that you're looking at. So I just want to say that, sort of stick to the I statement, stick to just explaining what it means and how the change is going to affect the town, and not, voting on any particular issue or putting out statements that would be for or against.
Can I just say something about that?
Okay.
I thought that's what we were elected to do, to give our opinions on issues. Because if we were just here to not say what we feel, I think that's not doing our job. So I cannot promise, Dora, that I'm going to give my opinion on these things, because I think that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental act of censorship, and I absolutely reject that. If we're not allowed to state our views on things, it's obviously not anything. It's not acceptable.
So,
John?
Now I have a concern about this process a little bit, because if they are in blocks, what good does it do us to individually talk about these if they're still going to be voted on in the block? That really bothers me. And I agree with Ms. Turnus that, but we can't change that now.
What I'm going to say is that I think our obligation as a select board with respect to these proposed charter amendments is to try to make sure that the voters of the town of Brattleboro are fully educated about the content of what's being presented, what it would mean for Brattleboro's form of government, and what the voting procedure is going to look like. You have in the binder the articles, and the articles call for all these things to be adopted in a block or rejected in a block. And we'll talk about it more on the 29th, but it may be that it's better for the health of the town and the government to reject the block, even if there's pieces you like about it, because it causes too much damage to the government. But that's something that's yet to be discussed going forward. But this is the opening discussion, and we wanted to make sure that everything was on the table. I expect that we're going to get additional information from various department heads and from the town manager over the course of the next week, and we'll look forward to resuming the discussion on the 29th, unless there's any further discussion to be had right now. All right, so with that, we're going to close the first public hearing on the proposed charter amendments. Thank you, Mr. Dimes, for presenting those. And we'll encourage everybody to continue participating going forward. The next matter on the agenda is the skate park location.
It's only 8:30.
And it's only 8:30, and we'll get to talk about the budget. So, we're going to begin by asking Mr. Francis and Ms. Lolott, maybe in that opposite order, Ms. Lolott and Mr. Francis, to tell us a little bit about the meeting with the personnel from the Agency of Natural Resources, I understand a week ago Friday, and what new information and light that shed on our ability to develop a skate park in the eastern section of Lower Memorial Park. Ms. Lolott, welcome.
Thank you. With that being said, as you just said, we had a meeting on January 9th with the Department of Environmental Conservation. The sole purpose of that meeting, as you are well aware, the Teresa Brungart Senior area was the area that was identified as the spot to do further feasibility as to if that location would be appropriate for a skate park, considering all the environmental concerns in and around that area. Without going through a full-blown feasibility study and using up valuable tax dollars at that point, Rod and I met with members of BASIC, and we thought it would be best to have a preliminary meeting with the Department of Environmental Conservation. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Rod to talk about the technical pieces.
Thank you, Charles. Hello again. So I'm going to refer you to the second memo from me in the packet.
No one that was in the public record?
It's also on the public record. And so, briefly, I provide background. As you know, we did a site visit in that area on August the 4th. Although the specific area was not on the list of preferred sites from the skate park site selection committee as part of that site visit and the subsequent select board meeting, we were asked to further investigate that particular location. Included in your packets for this week is a small map showing the outline of the park and a hand-drawn line labeled River Corridor. You see it running parallel with the brook at the top of the page, furthest away from the ring binder, and then traveling through most of the volleyball park, just touching the corner of the pool complex, and then heading over in kind of a gentle curve, taking in the very edge of the parking lot before it meets the street. Everything effectively to the north of that line is in the so-called River Corridor area. In an earlier round of mapping and regulation, the Department of Environmental Conservation referred to that as the Fluvial Erosion Hazard Area. It's since been renamed the River Corridor for reasons that I won't go into right now for the sake of sanity. The single biggest concern for the DEC personnel was the increased public safety hazard if the project was to go ahead. And then we discussed at some length the path of the current path of the brook, how stable the brook was, how likely it would be under either catastrophic conditions or just continual erosive behavior, that the brook would take a new path, and if it took a new path, roughly where that path might be. And so it was illustrated to us that it wasn't really a question of reinforcing or armoring the brook bank in any way, so that such a catastrophic event would not have an impact on public investment and public safety. The three experts all concluded that it was going to be a maintenance issue, an extremely expensive design process and an extremely expensive construction process, and even subsequent to that, no real meaningful improvement in a public safety hazard for people using that area of the park. So, in very broad and short language, we were strongly discouraged from pursuing the project. I'm happy to answer any questions on the basis of the memo. I realize that 8 points that are specific and quite technical in nature, I'm happy to explain any of those.
I want to make sure that we set out a process for this discussion going forward. We appointed a site selection committee. The site selection committee ranked a series of sites for a potential skate park. I asked the town manager secretary to put that ranking in the binder, so it would be available for all select board members and for anybody who was looking at our materials in advance of the meeting. Those materials have been distributed, including the ranking system. After receiving the site selection committee's recommendations and ranking of sites, we did site visits to a series of locations on a nice summer day, and we heard both at those site visits and then back here at select board meeting from various interested parties about where they thought the skate park should be. And I think it's fair to say that ultimately, based upon advocacy by BASIC and the proponents of the skate park itself, we decided to say that it could be, we could authorize it going into the Teresa Baumgartner area. So we voted to authorize them to investigate, BASIC to investigate construction of a skate park at that location. But we've now heard that Department of Environment and Conservation says that that's not feasible. So I guess we need to know first whether the board feels it needs to vote on withdrawing that authorization based upon the Department of Environmental Conservation advice. I think we then get to the next step, and we'll make that decision in a minute. I think we get then to the next step, which is how do we go about making a decision whether there's another location for the people who would like to develop a skate park on which to focus their attention. And I'm way happy to go back personally to the original site selection committee grid. Site selection committee was in favor of the Elm Street parking lot. That's what it's called, Elm Street, right, Patrick? Mm-hmm. The Elm Street parking lot. But the skate park community seemed not to want the park there. And so when we voted to not put the park there at Elm Street, we were roundly pilloried by the rest of the community, but the skate park committee liked us because they didn't want it there, but a bunch of other people asked why we were, kowtowing to the skate park committee. Me personally, I'm happy to authorize Elm Street lot or the Upper Memorial site. Either one works for me. My goal is really to avoid the intense acrimony that has characterized this discussion to this point. There was just horrible acrimony about the Corral lot. And I said it the last time, we almost came to blows at the site visit about the western side site at Living Memorial Park. I mean, somebody almost got punched, and it's just not okay. It's just not okay. So I don't know how the board wants to proceed, but I'd really like to hear from the board. I'm in favor of voting for either of those two sites and let the committee, do whatever feasibility work that it wants to do. Anybody else from the board at this point?
No, I'm staying on it.
David?
Yeah, Rob. Because there's also been some discussion about whether the Elm Street site is or is not going to be feasible. Mr. Hubbard keeps writing emails saying we're not going to face those development pressures and the DEC problems at the Elm Street lot, but I don't see why not. That place flooded over totally during Irene.
It's not a 250 permit zone.
I know it's not a 250 zone, but it's
still a flood.
It is a parcel that's subject to the special flood hazard area, which is part of the Brattleboro zoning ordinance. districting, and we have specific regulations that cover development in the special flood hazard area. It's true that we would not have to go to Act 250, but it's the process for a special flood hazard area permit also requires state review of any such permit application. And so while the state is working with strict criteria for a review of such a permit application, they could still make comment. And then I think there's the substance of the concerns that were raised for Living Memorial Park and whether they are in fact still in play. So if the primary concern is public safety, then you're setting aside the regulatory framework. I think it's a policy question that the Select Board needs to resolve explicitly. And then in addition to that, there's the other consideration coming from the DEC personnel, which is it a suitable site for significant public investment? And that's a separate and explicit question that I feel that the Select Board would need to respond to. And then thirdly and lastly, even if you concluded in both instances in the affirmative, you would be left with the memory and the reality that that whole area was inundated under Tropical Storm Irene conditions, and that there were other factors that were raised in the site visit and subsequently that may cause BASIC and the Select Board to reconsider the scoring that Elm Street received in light of what we've subsequently learned.
And the whetstone jumped its banks 10 years before in that location as well.
And there are, other prevailing conditions that make that site problematic. Without wanting to get overly technical, because it's just upstream from the Elm Street Bridge, it is at risk of cavitation.
We'll just move on from.
Do you want to just move on?
It would get a cavity.
Yeah, it's sort of some version of a great sucking sound. So as the waters recede, it can pull stuff from upstream of the bridge abutment, and I think that the site may have stability questions, which makes that a possibility.
John?
Are we going to hear from BASIC in this meeting?
Totally.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure, because
I just wanted to lay a foundation.
To me, that is the gist of this whole thing.
Yep. So, does anybody else want to speak from the board?
I just want to revisit your question about whether we need to vote on.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, it would be good for us to make that finalized and clear.
We'll make that motion sometime
Okay.
as this is going on.
Great.
Totally, yeah, but I wanted to know what you wanted to do. Anybody else on the board for right now? All right. Anybody in attendance want to speak to the topic of the site board, the skate park siting question? Mr. Clark? Welcome back. Yeah. Sure.
I do want to say thank you for at least allowing us to check out the feasibility of that location. We knew there was a possibility of it not going through, but at least it was on the table, we assessed it, and it didn't work out. So I was at the meeting on the 9th, that Friday. BASIC had a meeting the next Tuesday, the 13th, just to get the information back. At our meeting, we did not step back and say, okay, what's our next step? Do we reassess the sites that were presented by the site selection committee meeting? There was some discussion, but I cannot present an official, this is where we are as a group. I can give you my own personal opinion from discussions that I've had with, skaters, the people on the committee, but again, this is not an official BASIC perspective. I'm following along the lines as David. To me, it comes down basically to Elm and Upper Memorial. Elm, it's by itself. You got the river there. There's some questionable, activity. Upper Memorial, I stepped back and said, it's still within the park. Can we enhance the site? Can we bring other activities that it's not just a skate park up there? Can we put in a swing, benches, picnic tables, little parking area for parents when they come with the kids so it's not just a skate park up there, but look at it in a different fashion to bring the other activities up so it's not just skaters. And that's where I'm at. My number one site now at this point in time, with all the experience I have, I'm at Upper Memorial Park, so thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else want to speak to this issue? Carol?
I don't know if it's appropriate at this time, Living Memorial Park and the upper site, as Jeff just mentioned, it brings its pros and cons. I think it's important to realize that Living Memorial Park is a four-season facility. So it'd be important to put those snowshoes on right now and truck up to the top of the park and see if you were to put a skate park in that location, how is that going to affect snowboarding and skiing at the park, and what type of safety concerns that brings to the table. Because this time of year, it certainly would bring a different type of challenge to us. Certainly, I agree with what Jeff's comment is. You've got to have something up there that's going to attract them, because it is not on the beaten path. It's out of the way, and it will attract both positive and negative behavior because of its isolation. That's a concern that I need to make sure that you, as a board, know where I'm coming from as a recreation director. We need a skate park. Going back to where we were a little over a year ago when we set up the committee, we identified 41 areas in the community, and so we pretty much we did not leave any stone unturned, and then narrowed it down to 10, and then went on 10 site visits and came down to 4. So there are challenges in this community as to find the right spot and the right neighborhood. So it's a good fit for Brattleboro.
Anybody else want to speak to this right now? Yes,
Hi,
ma'am.
good evening, Brenda Carr. In listening to what Carol said, I appreciate her concerns. However, if you look, the T-bar doesn't go really anywhere near where the skate park would be. That really isn't where the trail is. And there would be a fence, hopefully, around the skate park, so, people would not be snowshoeing across it. My understanding is there is already a picnic site up there, and it's not that out of the way. It's a walk up the hill. What child wouldn't enjoy being able to skate and then go down and jump in the pool and swim? There are bathrooms there, there are concessions. I think it's an incredible site, and I would really feel badly if it was, overlooked, because it's everything. Basic has asked for a multi-use park, and it's in a multi-use park. There's baseball there, there's the bocce, there are swing sets. Parents can go to that park with children of all different age levels. A mother could be down at the swings or in a pool with a younger child while the child her other older children may be skateboarding. So I don't see the location of that in the park as such a detriment. And I'm a snowshoer myself, and there's plenty, more than enough area there for any snowshoer.
Anybody else right now? Ms. Carver?
Thank you, and I apologize, I didn't introduce myself fully earlier when I spoke. My name is Lori Cartwright, and I'm from Brattleboro, and I have been involved with this matter directly when I was on the Brattleboro Town School Board, and also indirectly as a member of the community. And I guess it's the white elephant in the room, but Ms. Lalott, I just want to query, could you please put it to words for me, what are the safety concerns for the skiers and snowboarders with respect to possibly having skateboarders there?
That is, it's the upper part of the park, and, people just don't go to the top and come straight down. They kind of meander a little to the left and a little to the right. That would be an area that they would, depending on how large that is, that's an area that they would come down, because they're going to go to the top. Some people go to the left, some people go to the right. My point is to put it out there. You have a multi-use park, and by putting something out in the middle of a ski area, we need to be talking about that ahead of time.
With respect to collisions and whatnot?
Correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else right now?
Do we want to, was there?
Yes, sir. Mr. Montgomery.
Hi, Les Montgomery. I've been examining that part of the park for quite some time. We made a video about some of the pros and cons, or mostly the cons, but I mean the pros. And it's situated to the side, and I don't think it would be so obstructive. You're talking about 5,000 square feet, maybe starting with just the big bowl itself. And skiers could ski around the bowl on a trail if there was a sufficient fence or barrier of some type. So you wouldn't have to eliminate total use of that area for the skiers. And it's right at the top of the hill, so that you're not, it's not like obstructing it down in the middle of the field or anything. It's off to one side. And there could be bathrooms up there. I think there is at the Kiwanis.
There is at the Kiwanis.
Yes, and there's the outdoor theater there, and there's the skating rink, which is really not that far off, and tennis courts alongside that. So you really do have a lot of activity up in that area, and I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that that would be too isolated. Okay, thank you.
David, Jeff, can I just ask you a technical question? It's not that technical. Is it closed during the winter?
The skate park, at this moment in time, I imagine if it's up there, it would be closed.
Would a normal skate park be closed during the winter around here?
Northampton, yeah.
More than likely, they're closed in the winter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we wouldn't maintain.
So there would not be two activities going on at the same time.
I think what Carol, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's features, 4 foot
Right.
high.
Oh, exactly.
And cement. So in the way that the thing would be designed, you would have to make sure that it would complement if we don't have a fence, that, there may be an opportunity there.
Or could some of those features be utilized by
snowboarders? Exactly. But, you have to take that into consideration, most definitely.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back and to 20 years ago or whatever, that this facility should be at the park. I mean, I've said that from day one. Now, where it's located, at this point, I'm not going to argue that point at all, but the park makes the most sense. It has the bathrooms, it has the lights, it's got the parking, it's got other things that are in there. I just think we have to make this work there somehow. So, and I'm not going to get into the where it should be or whatever, but I've always said it should have been there 20 years ago, but it's been.
Hi, Wendy Krieger, Brattleboro resident. Carol, I know there was some discussion about a dog park coming in, and wasn't it like right across the road from where the skate park would be? So that would even be another obstruction, because you would have some kind of fencing up there.
That was something we have already had a discussion. I met with the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, and that is far enough away, because as you come down, as the way the park is contoured, you come down into a bowl, then you got to come back up, and then you would be come to the other side of the road. That would be further enough away, but at the same time, we talked about that being a concern and identifying that fence line, because for skiers as well, would identify it much like the yellow top cap on the outfield fence at our ball fields.
Okay, and one more question to Rod. Is that your name?
Yes.
Rod. I always liked Elm Street, but I understand the issue with the brook. My question is, if temporary skateboarding jumps and everything were put up there, would that still have to go through the same type of,
You're talking about the Elm Street lot?
Yeah.
Yes. Technically, we would end up reviewing it in terms of the number of days or the number of weeks in a year that the land development was present. And I think that the other issue is that we would be engaged in zoning parlance of a change of use. So currently it's a parking lot, and you would be seeking a local zoning permit to change it from a parking lot to an open space, to a park. And under those circumstances, it would need to be reviewed and permitted. So there's no really easy way to make a temporary installation at that site. and then have it as a semi-permanent temporary situation, if you can follow what I'm saying.
Thanks.
Dora?
Tim, better late than never, buddy.
Dora Bubalis. I just want to say that I think, we had a committee, obviously, that looked really hard at this. You guys have the grid on there. I think from a physical standpoint, I think you can make either site work. I do believe that there's probably going to be more opposition to the idea of Elm Street than Memorial Park, which, gets into the acrimony that David was talking about. I think while there are issues with the issue, it's different issues than what's at the Memorial Park site from, obviously we have structures that are being built there. The New England Youth Theater and the Cultural Intrigue were able to build their sites so that they, withstood. So from a design perspective, it can be done. The question is, where are people most comfortable with the idea? There are, the Living Memorial Park is a park. It's got a lot of the amenities that people are talking about. It allows them to be able to use both the pool and the skate park at the same time, which is great. I love the idea of a downtown site. I liked the Elm Street site for a long time. But, so I think from when you're thinking about weighing it, I think either one can be made to work. It's a matter of where do the majority of people kind of have an interest in having it.
Thank you, Dora. Other comments from anybody who's in attendance? Patrick or Jan, if you can help to refresh my recollection, when we voted in the summer to authorize BASIC to move forward in that lower Memorial Park site, was it phrased in terms of authorizing BASIC to begin work investigating the feasibility of that site? Or was it also to authorize construction of the skate park there? Do you remember?
I thought it was feasibility.
I don't specifically remember. I do happen to know, because I looked at it recently, that the article for the warning was not site-specific about financial support for feasibility. But I'd have to double-check the rest of your question.
Because I'm prepared to make a motion to authorize BASIC to investigate the feasibility of the Upper Living Memorial Park site.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm right there, too.
All right. So I move to authorize BASIC to investigate feasibility of the Upper Living Memorial Park site. Yeah, no, just because I make a motion doesn't mean we're finished.
No, we're not finished.
Yep.
So what did that
The
read?
language here.
What did that say?
Appears to say, motion by John Allen to authorize the development of a skate park at the Teresa S. Brungart Senior Area in the northeast corner of Living Memorial Park. Motion carried 5-0.
Okay.
That
So
seems
can
pretty clear.
Can I have that?
That was just a little statement. That's fine.
To build it.
All right, so
We just have to authorize it.
I withdraw my prior motion, and now I move that the Select Board authorize BASIC to investigate the feasibility and to develop skate park in the Upper Living Memorial Park site. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0.
So that.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, ma'am.
So that's a good thing? So I'm not sure that we
Patty,
need
let me
another
make,
motion.
Patty.
Very good. Thanks all for coming.
Let me make a copy. I'll give it
Thank you. The next matter on the agenda is the FY16 budget.
Everybody's gone.
Right, that's the problem.
Okay, this is all right. This is, I'll give it.
I'm still confused.
Right. All right, so we've now got a number of agenda items relating to the budget and to finalization of work before town meeting. So I lost my agenda. The agenda, thank you. So the three items for discussion are the FY16 budget, the unassigned fund balance, and the local option sales tax. I think we'll do the same thing we did last time and essentially, thank you, essentially walk through each of them together. My recollection is that the only outstanding item with respect to the FY16 budget was the $7,000 for the Museum and Art Center. And so if we can have an update, please, about whether the museum responded to us and told us that they need that money for a specific project.
So following up on the conversation from the last board meeting, I reached out, I called over to the museum. We traded phone calls for a day or so. Eventually, we began an email exchange. And over the course of several emails, I made it clear if there was going to be any request, we needed to have it. We needed to have it by Friday of last week. Unfortunately, at this point in time, I have no request. So.
Well, then, I guess that we're going to ask that the budget be revised to remove the $7,000, which would then make the total, as I understand it, $15,714,494. Okay?
Correct.
Now, I guess my inquiry at this point is whether anybody on the board, any department heads, anybody who's in attendance, has any questions about the $15,714,494 total revenue and total expense budget as presented. Dick?
I guess I would ask you, as I talked about this at the December 29th meeting and the 1st January meeting, about removing the money for the air packs, which is roughly $240,000, from the general fund budget and paying for those out of the surplus revenue. And I think that's a very prudent thing to do. I think the amount of money, when we have that amount of cash to pay for something, rather than incurring debt for a couple of years, is not a good thing to do when we can pay cash for that and actually reduce the budget and help the taxpayers out further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeGray. I know that we're going to be talking very shortly about fund balance policy. And I know that the new town manager's got a pretty strong view about that issue, and you'll be hearing about it pretty soon. It'll be the first time you hear something clearly articulated about fund balance policy in like 10 years. So you'll be happy. You know, you may not like the answer, but it'll be clear and cogent and well-reasoned. So, you know, Mr. O'Connor.
David, the actual number for the expenses in the budget is $15,721,497. There's a $3 difference there, and it's just rounding when Patrick uses a spreadsheet to do the
Thank you.
numbers.
Well, what I'm going to explain right now is that earlier today, anticipating that we might get to this point with the budget today, I asked for the motion to be gotten together to approve the budget today, but I asked too late. It was like 5:45. And so, you know, Mr. Elwell just started this morning, so he and Patrick just, you know, couldn't respond to my request in such quick turnaround. So the motion to approve the budget will happen on the 29th at the same time as we're approving the warnings.
It's going to be a busy meeting.
There's going to be a lot going on because we're also going to be having a public hearing. about the second public hearing about the charter amendments. So we're starting, I don't know, what time is that meeting again, Jan? 5:30?
5:15.
5:15.
Oh, good.
5:15, January 29th. Be here or be square.
That's right.
5:15, January 29th. Anything else about the budget, please?
Yeah,
Kate?
can I ask you a question? This is just like a clarifying question. John's $20,000 for the skate park, which we already have, a item on it. You know what I mean? We voted to bring it to town meeting. That won't appear in the budget until they say yes.
Exactly
So there could
right.
be an extra 20,000 that's not here.
And $3.
Got it.
And Peter's already got that 20,000 earmarked.
I just want, we all have to remember that.
Yes. Right.
And there also may be some discussion about use of fund balance and some other items.
Right.
So we're not going to finalize this discussion about the budget and the final number until we get there. But we'll have the motion ready for the meeting on the 29th, and if we need to make any changes thereafter based upon further discussions that we've had, we can do that on the 29th. Anything further about the budget at this point? So I'm going to once again just be clear that if this budget remains as is, taxes would go up about 2%. But we have to be clear, I've been saying it at every meeting, there is a new expense that households in Brattleboro are going to be incurring because everybody who lives in a building that's got 4 or less units is going to have to buy garbage bags in order to throw out their garbage starting July 1. So there are additional costs that are being shifted to the residents of the town of Brattleboro beyond those that are included in this budget. And I've kept saying it because I don't want there to be any surprise about it, along with whatever increase there is in the budget. And I just keep saying it over and over again so that hopefully everybody's heard it. Anything further about the budget? Great, so that's a plan. We'll vote on the 29th on the budget. The next item was the unassigned fund balance. And what I'm going to say by way of recap is that we have had sort of a moving target about how much, if any, of the unassigned fund balance we want to authorize ourselves to use next year for either operating or capital expenses. And the number's been $350,000, and it's been $500,000, and it's been $750,000. And no final decision has yet been made about how we're going to proceed with that unassigned fund balance. So, and we have about $1.9 million in a bank right now. So with that in mind, first I ask if anybody on the board's got anything to say about that. No. Then I'm going to recognize Mr. Elwell, please, to talk about his position about the unassigned fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It won't come as a surprise to any of the select board members because I've had the opportunity to speak privately, individually with each one of you about this. But I'm going to explain my thoughts in addition to making the recommendation to you. I'd like to explain it so that others who are interested in the topic, Mr. DeGray particularly, who's made comments at multiple meetings now on the topic, will understand not only what I'm recommending to you, but why. So it is my strong advice to you that you establish as a policy of the board using the unassigned fund balance only for non-recurring expenses. It's important when we talk about what's a non-recurring expense to understand that that's not, we use the term non-recurring carefully, purposefully, so as to distinguish it from operating. Often, everybody, including me, we tend to think of our recurring expenses as being our operating expenses because those are the most common recurring expenses that we have. But something, for instance, like the air packs or some other large capital expense that's included within an annual capital program, like a dump truck, perhaps, but other things that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, but within the $1 million or so of annual expenses on capital items are part of the recurring town budget. So when I recommend to you that we limit the use of unassigned fund balance to non-recurring items, it's really for things like the Green Street retaining wall, or the Elliott Street Bridge, or the life safety work that needs to be done within this building, because those are items that are not part of a plan, not within the range of expenses that are part of the recurring costs of town government from year to year, and I think are the best use of the people's savings account, the taxpayer savings account that accrues from year to year with surpluses, because they help accomplish two things. At the moment in time when you're using the money, you're investing in something that's for a public benefit that we couldn't or didn't plan for. So you help smooth out the cost impact of dealing with that item, whether it's an emergency or whether it's a more discretionary item. You help to even out the longer term impact to the taxpayers of handling that item at that time. But the other thing you do that I think is actually fundamentally more important is run the operations of town government from year to year to year on the amount of money that we can afford in the community to pay for town government. And I think it's very risky business to be using unassigned fund balance as a balancing measure in the adoption of any annual budget, because even though that may be successful for several years in a row, there inevitably will come a time when revenues don't measure up, or some circumstance causes expenditures to be higher than expected. And that bad year is a double whammy to the taxpayers, because you suffer that bad year and then you suffer the consequence of having to make up the difference to catch up in the tax rate the following year, because you've been relying on drawing off of the savings account as part of handling the recurring expenses. So I have a very healthy respect for the fact that there are other opinions in the room, that you as a board may make a different decision. You may feel like you want to give this more thought, but especially given the circumstances facing the town at this moment, the surprises that are currently on our plate that we must deal with, and the understanding that we've got bigger picture financial challenges to deal with together in the year ahead and probably beyond. All of that together causes me to feel strongly about making my first recommendation to you be the recommendation that you reserve for non-recurring expenses use of fund balance.
In that regard, I'm just going to note that buried in the correspondence section of the binder are very preliminary estimates for the Green Street retaining wall, which run from a low end of $183,000 to a high end of $774,000, which at the high end is a third of the money in the surplus. And the Elliott Street Bridge, we don't have numbers right now. I know that you're working on scoping that out as well. But there's a whole series of those items, along with the $470,000 in municipal center repairs, that we're going to have to belly up to the bar about those as well soon. Mr. DeGray?
Well, I'm disappointed, Peter, you didn't call me to have an individual talk as an honorary board member. If we look at what you are saying, and parts of what you're saying I agree with, and so, but if we're looking at what you're saying, what would our budget look like with these capital items that are in there? It's going to change from 2 cents to go up to 4 or 5 cents, because if you, well, you're going to buy a cruiser. There are several things that you are going to pay for with capital money, that if you don't do that, if you're just not going to purchase those, and if you purchase those, you're going to have to either add them as part of the operating budget, or you're going to have to take notes out, which either way is going to raise our budget up from a potential 2-cent increase to 3 or 4 or even higher. Your example of putting money in here or any of our buildings long-term, that $400,000 into this building, I would say to you the same thing, that we have equipment that lasts for 10 or 12 years. It's not like we are replacing that same dump truck every year. And so, in the issue that you gave, I mean, we might have to put another $300,000 or $400,000 into this building 10 years down the road. So I'm not sure I would agree with that analogy in terms of public facilities. Now, the road issues, to me, those are things that we're going to have to fund. I think that if you said, okay, the bridge that we're going to have to repair, we'd be taking a note out for that. Now, there might be a match to that, or from some funds that we might get from the state that we could use that surplus money for. And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have some money. The issue is an arbitrary number as to how much we should have. And I agree with you that we have to be able to give the taxpayers something that they can afford. And in reality, maybe it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other that we're talking about. I appreciate that you're trying to clarify that for the board and us and I. So it's not like you and I are on different roads, but I think that we're probably closer than you think. But I do believe that there's an opportunity here to save the taxpayers' money without adding debt to us by using some of this money. And you're right. When I first got on the board in 2006, we were in a hole. We had a deficit. So there's no given that you're always going to have a surplus, and you certainly know that. I'm not telling you anything new. And so we've been pretty fortunate, actually, over the past several years to have all these surpluses that we can even have a discussion about using. But at the end of the day, I think it's about keeping the tax impact on the taxpayers of Brattleboro as low as we possibly can without putting us in financial danger.
I want to clarify, and Patrick, I guess, and I'm going to ask you a question. My understanding is that the summary sheet of the budget that's been presented to us for review, which provides for the 2% increase in taxes, that revenue figure at $15,721,497, now $7,000 less, includes the first $140,000 in interest payments.
Correct.
On a police fire bond, and includes the cruiser, the paving, and the windows money.
That's all correct.
Right. And so before this version, we actually had about $6,000 or $8,000 or $20,000 cut, drop in the total amount of the budget, and so now we're up about 2% with those additional items included.
That's entirely correct.
All right. It's getting late. I don't remember your last name, please. Ms. Joy.
I'm Dale Joy,
There we go.
and we're talking about the budget. One thing is that we really need to think before we use this surplus. Are these emergency things we need, like a cruiser? That's an emergency vehicle. We need things like that. Now, those potholes in the roads that you guys want to cover up, some of us consider them speed bumps to slow people down. That you allocated another $100,000 to. You had $200,000 and you added to it. Take that away, but don't take away emergency stuff. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am. Other comments from anybody about the fund balance issue?
Okay, oh.
John?
No, go ahead. You had a question.
Could you go first?
Okay. Well, no, the only thing that I have is, and Peter, I agree with everything you said, and you've shed a light on me because, as the rest of the board knows, I'd spend it all if we could. But there is this clarification between reoccurring and non-reoccurring items. And I think that's where the gray area can be. You know, like, really, what constitutes a reoccurring as opposed to a non-reoccurring item. So I think that's where it's going to be hard to differentiate between what we spend the money to, you know, what we put that money to or what we don't put it to. So that's where I would have a hard time clarifying what is, you know, in your opinion, you may have, you know, there may be, like the air packs or whatever. To me, I don't know if that's reoccurring. It doesn't seem to be. It seems like that's a one-time item. So where I agree with you in principle, it's just going to be hard for me to break down what, you know, is a grade or a one-time. Well, not really, because you need them. You know, you need them every year. So bridge work, we're always going to have bridge work. It's always going to be a bridge or a street or something that's got you know, that needs major work. Is that reoccurring or is that not? So that's the only thing I just wanted to get some clarity down the road on. I mean, does anybody else feel like?
I think if you talk about recurring, we have recurring walls falling down. It recurs all the time. It never stops. It's an ongoing.
It's an ongoing thing. So that's where it's
yeah, I think that.
It's a good point, John. I think history can be helpful to us. I think also, Mr. Elwell, you can certainly bring to us your experience with having this particular stand, which is very reasoned and very well articulated. But I think if we look at history, if we look at the history of what this town has been up against, that will help us do that sorting.
Right.
About what is constantly something that needs addressing and what is a more unusual or unexpected, unanticipated expense.
I think that's the argument for keeping a nice balance in there and sticking with the recommendation. I think I don't know if you're recommending that we sort of write a policy and have them in writing someplace. I think it's important to have guidelines and for us to share the understanding as much as we can of what that means. I think it's also important to recognize that things happen that change whatever your intentions are. It changes. When it's like if the bottom fell out of Mike's oldest fire truck, that would be a non-recurring thing. We'd have to spend the money on right away.
Right.
And so I think it's a good guideline. I think there are going to be things that are going to come up that are going to. But right now we got more than enough to spend whatever we have. So it's not even an issue.
It's true. And just to clarify one thing, I think that the decisions that you've made within the last several weeks regarding paving and the cruisers particularly, the windows are a little bit more complicated than that. But particularly, you know, you fundamentally looked at the question of, you know, is one a year going to keep us up where we belong in terms of adequately staffing public safety, and you decided no, we need to be on a schedule that's replacing 2 cruisers a year. So for this year, we decided to add the second one in, not as a one-off, but because we need to be buying 2 cruisers a year in order to properly equip the police department. And likewise with the paving. You know, there's a standard of safety and service in the community you want to maintain on the roadways. So you've committed to an additional level of funding for paving. My understanding is not in order to catch up to something this year, but because that's the standard you want to maintain going forward. Those are really easy to identify as recurring expenses. The windows are a little more complicated. The air packs may be a little more complicated. They're going to recur for sure. They're on a capital schedule, but there's a longer interval, I believe, and if I'm wrong, Mike should step up and tell me right now. Those items that are on the capital program that have a longer interval before they're going to get replaced get a little more complicated for us. But I think as we set forth to work together, it's important to me that we work hard to view something that is expensive, but within the context of a program, as being part of that which is recurring. Because it's the program that we're funding year after year after year. Is there room for discussion at any given moment about, you know, what's out at the margin of that boundary? Absolutely there is, you know. And there's room for discussion about whether or not it's a prudent policy. I happen to feel really strongly that it is for the 2 reasons that I've expressed to you.
So what you're saying is you don't have a 5-year policy plan ready for us yet?
Not tonight.
That's what you're saying?
But I would say this, I also don't think you need to adopt it as a chiseled in stone policy either. I think it would be helpful as you make your final decisions about this year's budget to commit to not being overly reliant on the available unassigned fund balance, because we set ourselves up for trouble in the future. You know, we got a lot of unmet needs, and we might have a bad year in revenues or some other unforeseen situation that makes us really regret having relied on the unassigned fund balance this year. So I would urge you strongly not to do it right now.
Right.
I'd urge you as a matter of practice and expectation to try to avoid using it. And if you were to decide as a board you wanted us to write it up as a defined policy that you could adopt, I'd be happy to do that.
So.
We keep stepping on Kate head.
Kate, did you want to?
I was just going to say that I totally agree with what Peter's saying. And to me, with the whole recurring thing, to me, it's like your own budget at home. Every month you have your checkbook and you have those same things that you fill out, you know, you send a check to every single month. You know, that's the recurring thing. But then that thing that comes that you don't expect is the non-recurring thing. So I just look at it that way, and I think it's very smart.
I think what we're gonna, hold on a second, Ms. Short. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna also defer that ultimate decision about whether we're gonna be including an item on the warning with respect to fund balance to the next meeting, because everybody's gotta let this set in. But like I say, there's been a range of steadily increasing amounts that we're thinking about taking out of the fund balance. And if it's not going to be an article at all, that's fine. We just need to be ready to have that decision made again on the 29th. So it'll be a busy meeting on the 29th. Mr. Tisman.
Well, no, go ahead.
No, Mr. Tisman. I'm not sure I'm recognizing Mr. DeGray to talk about it again.
It's a diversion, so maybe this is pertinent, because I want to talk about police fire just a second.
Ask it, go ahead.
Well, you have 4.7, so where is the rest of the money coming from?
Oh, I think that it's clear that a process is going to unfold going forward one way or another about what's going to happen with the police fire facilities. And either the $140,000 in interest is or is not going to remain in this year's budget. But in terms of the process going forward and authorization for additional bonding, that's something that has yet to be decided about at the board level and at the town level. So I don't think we can answer the question, where's the rest of that money coming from right now, because the decision hasn't been made.
I guess I don't understand, but the money is included in this budget to borrow more money.
$140,000 in interest payments, in case we decide to borrow the money this year, is in this draft of the budget. That's correct.
So the project is still not
finalized. That's correct.
We haven't borrowed the money.
And there's question whether we even have authority to borrow the money without going back to town meeting. And there's difference of opinion on the board on that as well.
Would it be smart to do it without going back?
Exactly right.
Nothing to do with it.
So will you get to that on the 29th, or is that going to happen?
The $140,000 is in this 15 million budget. It may stay there after the 29th. It may not stay there after the 29th. And then town meeting will do with it what it will. And then the rest of the $4.7 million we've not planned for yet.
That's why I was confused.
Okay, yeah, did I answer your question? Did I answer your question?
That'll be another story.
It has yet to unfold, that planning work. All right, and then the last item is the local option sales tax, before we get to 2 final items. And we're going to have to make a decision on the 29th whether we are warning either a ballot item or a town meeting item, or both, or neither, on the 1% local option sales tax. And I'm just putting that back in everybody's focus so that everybody remembers it's for decision on the 29th. I'm going to make a quick pitch that I think the local option sales tax is really tied up with the financing for the police fire. So I believe it's premature to put it on the ballot and on town meeting in March, but I know that that is yet to be voted on. Anything else about local option sales tax at this point? All right, so the next item on the agenda.
Yeah, I will say
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think it's important to be clear that we're not voting on whether there's going to be a local option sales tax. We'll be voting on whether the town will get to vote on it. If we decide not to put it on, then we're voting that there won't be. And I think that's an important clarification. So we can't vote yes to it, but we can vote no.
And we will make that decision on the 29th, I expect. So the next item on the agenda is to consider the contract for the town attorney. And we made the decision this year to negotiate with the current town attorney. The contract that's being presented now for approval provides for a 1% increase from last year to this year with the town attorney. And that's what's presented for approval under item G in the binder. Total cost of $101,000 in $8,416.66 monthly installments. Anybody have any questions about the town attorney contract? Anybody on the board? Anybody who's in attendance? Does anybody want to make a motion on the town attorney contract?
Where is it?
We have it somewhere.
I move to approve the one-year contract with Fisher and Fisher for legal representation as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. And then the last item on the business agenda is to appoint town attorney, town treasurer, and town clerk.
I move to appoint Fisher & Fisher Law Firm as town attorney, Annette Cappy as town clerk, and John O'Connor as treasurer for a term beginning March 22nd, 2015, and ending March 19th, 2016.
We have a motion to appoint Fisher & Fisher as town attorney, Ms. Cappy as town clerk, Mr. O'Connor as town treasurer. That is, of course, subject to ratification by town meeting. Is there any further discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Somebody's turn to read the calendar.
I will read the calendar.
Because I'll cough all the way through it.
Okay. On Wednesday, January 21st at 5 p.m., the Pay-As-You-Throw Committee will meet in the Select Board meeting room. Also at 7 p.m., the Development Review Board will meet in the Select Board meeting room. On Monday, January 26th at 5:30 p.m., the Citizens Police Communication Committee will meet at the Brooks Memorial Library Community Room. On Tuesday, January 27th at 8:30 a.m., the Traffic Safety Committee will meet in the Select Board meeting room. At 5:15 p.m., the Conservation Commission will meet in the Hannah Cosby Room. On Thursday, January 29th at 5:15 p.m., there will be a special Select Board meeting. On Monday, February 2nd at 5 p.m., the Energy Committee will meet in the Hannah Cosby Room. Also on Monday, February 2nd at 6 p.m., the Planning Commission will meet in the Select Board meeting room. And on Tuesday, February 3rd, we will be back for our regularly scheduled Select Board meeting.
We're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. I want to thank everybody who participated in this lively meeting. I want to thank everybody who was watching on BCTV. I want to thank all members of the staff who stayed until this late hour. I want to thank the ASL interpreters, members of the press, who are former WTSA, BCTV. Good night.